All right, it's 6:15. It is the first meeting of May. It's May 6th for City Council. Ryan, let's do roll call.
Okay, sounds good. Mayor Godis,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman,
Here.
Councilor Stepp,
Here.
Councilor Davis, Councilor Wusso,
Yes, here.
Councilor Kaup,
Here.
Councilor Hershey.
Here, can we recall Mr. Davis is trying to log on?
Councilor Davis.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
All right, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next item is agenda changes and conflicts. Are there any changes that anybody would like to talk about? Any conflicts of interest on this evening's agenda? No? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 8, citizens appearing before council. These are for items not appearing on the agenda. So if there's an item on the agenda you would like to speak about, please reserve your comments for that time. Okay. We have Joyce Cohen. Joyce Cohen, you have 3 minutes, and please give your name and address, and yeah, love to hear from you.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. My name is Joyce Cohen, and my address is 120 Offerson Road, Beaver Creek, Colorado. And I'm got to talk fast, but I'm here to talk to you tonight about an issue of growing concern actually in this country, and that is puppy mills. And I'm not talking about responsible breeders that you may know, but I'm talking about factory farms that produce thousands of dogs and keep them in horrific conditions. And if you see pictures of these puppy mills, you wonder what you can do to help. And you folks actually do have the opportunity to help by joining over 350 towns, including all of Summit County, Fairplay, Alma, Berthoud, Vale, and Eagle, that have passed ordinances banning the sale of puppies and kittens in pet stores. Pet stores are the ones that buy from puppy mills, therefore perpetuating their existence. Puppy mills are governed by the USDA, and I use the word governed very loosely. It's perfectly legal to keep dogs in cages that are only 6 inches bigger than the dog. They can be mesh and wire cages that are stacked on top of one another so that the dogs above actually relieve themselves on the ones below. They're not required to let the dogs out of their cages ever. They're not required to let the dogs have interactions with other dogs or humans, and they don't have to give the dogs proper veterinary care. The CDC has recommended that people do not buy puppies from pet stores because the dogs are kept in such horrific conditions. The puppies that they produce are often sick and sometimes die within weeks of getting them. And you may be wondering, what does this have to do with Glenwood Springs? We don't have a pet store that sells puppies and kittens, but I cannot stress enough that the time to pass this ordinance is before a pet store comes to town and wants to open. Once it's there, it's almost impossible to open this store. I'm sorry, to pass this ordinance. And also, the more towns that pass the ordinance, the stronger the message that we send to the state that this is something that's important for the state to take on. Selling dogs and cats in retail is a dying business. 24 out of the 25 major chains refuse to do it. Instead, they hold adoption events, which is a win-win. Obviously, shelters get rid of some pets and people buy their supplies there. No responsible breeder will sell to a puppy store. You are not shutting down a responsible breeder, only the nightmare that is the puppy mill. People can still get designer dogs or purebred dogs. They just have to go to a responsible breeder rather than a pet store. I think the Humane Society is going to be sending you some information. I sent you the model ordinance that the towns that have passed it have used. If you have any questions, Ryan has my email.
Thank you, Joyce. All right, next on the list.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, can you unshare your screen for the timer so I can access the list of participants? Thanks. I'm sure there's a way I can do it. I just know it this way. Next up is McGregor and Smith.
There. Now I think it works. Steve Smith and Heather McGregor, 63 Airport Road. Thank you very much for this opportunity to remind you of our sincere request that reconstruction of Airport Road as part of South Bridge project include proper curb and gutter on both sides of the street through our neighborhood. Tonight, in particular, we ask you to consider this issue sooner than later in two planning and design processes: South Midland reconstruction and South Bridge. As you know, the roundabout currently under construction at Airport Road, Midland and 4 Mile was originally envisioned as part of the South Bridge project, with drainage continuity included in the original design sketches. The roundabout will include a storm runoff retention pond intended to function in the same manner as roadside swales, percolating and absorbing stormwater instead of sending it directly to the river. The roundabout and pond, we urge, should be designed and installed in a way that anticipates the option of accommodating runoff from the northern portion of Airport Road. Effectively directing that runoff to the roundabout pond is another reason to install proper curb and gutter on both sides of Airport Road. Meanwhile, in order to preserve that option, it is important to configure the roundabout drainage system now for continuity with work on Airport Road in the future. Thank you again for your time and for your careful consideration of our request.
Thanks, Steve. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to comment? All
Mr.
right.
Mayor, I thought we had someone else who wanted to comment. You don't see anybody else?
I don't see anybody else. I see some call-in listeners. If you're calling in, I believe the call-in. Oh, that nice timing. Sharma Phillips.
Sharma, I think it's pronounced Sharma Phillips.
Sharma. Okay, Miss Phillips.
You have to unmute.
I did unmute. Oh, there you go, Sharma.
Okay, I'm ready to start.
Go ahead. Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Sharma Phillips. I am a certified fitness instructor, personal trainer, and endurance athletic coach. I own my own business, Tri Valley Training, LLC. I have certifications for all of my classes and I am fully insured. I'm here tonight because I would like to ask permission to hold fitness classes in the city park for pay. Myself, as well as many other instructors, have used the public park as a spot to meet clients and friends to hold classes, especially last year with the pandemic shutdown. We needed a safe, socially distanced space to keep our minds and bodies active. This year, I plan to organize my return to the parks and started doing advertising. After that, the community center contacted me and told me that I would need a permit. I gladly completed the permit, included the copy of my insurance listing the city of Glenwood Springs as one of my entities covered up to $1 million as requested. The day that my class was to start in the park, I received an email that said that the city was unable to approve my permit and I could not hold classes. There was no indication for a reason or reference of the city code that said that I was prohibited from this activity. A few days after that, I received an email from the community center or a contact that asked me if I'd like to become an instructor for them again. I told them I would love to come back, but declined as I have struggled to work out indoors with the mask on. They told me that if I worked for them, I would be allowed to hold classes at the park. In effect, I would be allowed to conduct classes at Two Rivers Park so long as I was doing it for the city and bringing in money for the city, but I could not do it for myself to make money. Since that time, I moved one of my classes to a private property, but I have worked out with some friends at the park on Tuesday nights. Last Wednesday, I was contacted by a detective of the Glenwood Springs Police Department. He asked me questions as if I had committed a crime. The detective never told me what city rule or law I was breaking or why he was questioning me about my personal activities. To date, I have not located anything in the municipal code stating why I cannot use the park. It appears that the city is enforcing an unidentified rule, but it seems that the rule is only being applied to fitness instructors. Many other businesses have used the park. There's a gentleman who does Tai Chi mid-morning. There's a cycling club that meets at the park every summer. They do a lesson and then they ride. This has been going on for 20 years. I'm just curious if they're being enforced with the rule. I'm asking for permission to conduct my private classes for pay at the park at a time that does not conflict with city programming or reserve facilities. Again, from all the information I've gathered, it appears that I feel like I'm being singled out as a fitness instructor. Regardless of whether my request is approved, I'm asking the city code and ordinances to be written down. I need to know why it is prohibiting tax-paying citizens from using the public park to earn money. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sharma. Is there anybody else? I see 3 people have called in. If you've called in, I believe it's *9 if you want to raise your hand and you're in the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for calling on that person. I just think you may have missed it and she was late. Thank you.
I did miss that. Thank you, Tony. I don't see anybody else from the public that has any comments. So seeing none, I will bring it back to council comments. Is there any council comments this evening? Paula, Charlie, Shelley. Go ahead, Paula.
I just following up on that last comment. Do we have a city side of that story, or is there a regulation that I guess Deborah or Carl, is there something that we should be doing?
Sorry, I'm trying to get myself
Or,
up.
who's taking it? You or me?
Go ahead and start, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. We do not allow, we don't know everything that goes on, but we currently do not allow for-profit businesses to run private business in our parks, because if we did, all of our parks would be commercialized. So that is our policy. We did tell Sharma this. I believe she used to work for the city, and we were just enforcing our policy.
And that's policy, not code, just so I know.
Yeah, so underneath the 090, which is a section on public lands, we have permits for activities in the park. Those are generally, or they are limited in the code to a certain number of times per year. So it's not like you would set up and, hold a fitness class every Tuesday and Thursday for, every month of the year kind of thing. It's, I think it's, and I don't have it right in front of me. I think it's 3 times that you can have that special use permit on an annualized basis. Brian and I are working right now on going back and looking at not only this kind of permitting, but licensing in general in the city, as well as some business licensing to try to consolidate and simplify it. I would say sort of from a policy standpoint, as well as a practical code standpoint, that the parks are there for the public to enjoy, not necessarily we have this conversation around food trucks and brick and mortar versus non, and all of those kinds of things. They're very similar conversations about how those public lands are being put to use and for whose benefit. So I think that Brian and I are hopeful that by the beginning of June, we'll probably be able to come back with some sort of recommendations on how to change the code. But as it stands right now, the activity is prohibited because it is occurring more than those few times per year.
And was that activity increase as a result of COVID? I mean, we accommodated restaurants and those kind of things. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, certainly. And we're rolling back from that now, obviously. We tried to accommodate businesses in almost any way that we could. That has changed dramatically. And I would point out that there are, we do have brick and mortar businesses in town that don't get the benefit of the city providing space for them to conduct their for-profit activities. We do have for-profit companies that do utilize city space. Boat Ramp is a great example at Two Rivers Park, that, that runs into the tens of thousands of dollars a year that those user fees, those commercial users using public facilities pay for the use of that. So I think that's, there's an equity issue going on there.
Okay.
And I think you do have to play it out that if we allow this in an unlimited fashion, our parks are lovely in a lovely location. You will have a lot of commercialization of our parks. And it is not something cities typically allow.
Maybe it's an income source. I'm kidding. I understand what you're saying.
Honestly, that is in fact that's part of this, right? We don't have a mechanism. If you guys do decide that from a policy perspective, big picture policy perspective, you want to allow commercial activities in the parks on a much greater basis than we do currently. We don't have a mechanism whereby to create that benefit for the public, right? In terms of that income, that revenue stream for the use of that facility. So I think that's where, we just need to work through some of those things. Like I said, Brian and I are just starting to work on that, in part as a result of this triggering event on how the parks will be used moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, and I know we're in council comments, but there was another attendee whose hand was up during citizens' comments, and I'm certainly willing to cede my time, but if you could call on her briefly, I think there's a problem with Zoom and you just missed it, if you would mind.
No, I didn't miss it, and we've closed public comment for the time.
Mr. Mayor, I object. The name was, the hand was up.
No,
Well,
it wasn't. I'm sorry.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. You're wrong.
I will
This is
open it up.
back, Mr. Mayor. Are you not allowing the public?
Tony, I'm running this meeting. This is out of order. If council wants to take a vote, to overrule me, to allow us to go back to public comment, no matter when somebody puts a hand up, I'm more than willing. So is there a motion to have a vote of council to force me to reopen public comment at any time in a meeting upon the request of one council member?
I move to reopen public comment.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Okay, Paul, thank you. I will say, to that point, I used to be the recreation director for the city of Aspen, and the city of Aspen did have a policy where youth sports would be one rate, nonprofits would have another rate, but there was a revenue share. So if a private enterprise wanted to do something, it was a partnership with the city, and obviously it was a permit basis, and they wouldn't allow certain activities or things that weren't in the public good, but that can exist. It just, from my understanding, it doesn't exist now, but we will have something to come before us shortly. Or will it come before us, or are you gonna?
Yes.
No, it's definitely, we're going to have to change the way the code is structured in 090 on public land. So for us to even put that in front of you to consider acting on the request.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. Charlie, then Shelley, then Ingrid.
I just follow up to that. Well, Carl, I've been having some trouble hearing you tonight, so I don't know if that's speaker or it's my hearing again. But the other, my comment, I kind of followed what was said is that when you look at that, I think you should look at school groups. I know that a lot of teachers, in particular when spring comes, get the kids out of the classrooms and go over there. I don't know if that's something you ought to be looking at as well. Just point out I have seen that.
Yeah.
You don't want, if you're going to cover, you want to try to cover all the issues. The other thing I was going to bring up is the request for proposals on the 6th Street is out. I think it's coming in later this month. It's a return date. There some discussion about North Landing, that process, so that is being looked at. Just so you're all aware, we may be coming back to talk to you about that. And I think that at least right now, the Parks Department, Deborah can correct me if I'm wrong, is going to do some, we call it turf renovation at North Landing, just to make it look a little bit nicer, a better appearance for the summer until some longer term decisions are made about the North Landing. I think that covers everything on that issue. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Charlie. Shelley.
Okay, real quick, I'll chime in on that last public comment also. I'd love to see that come to council for policy, because I would like to see the use of our parks optimized for the good of our public. And I understand what you're saying, Deborah, about commercialization of the park, but I think there are some uses of the park that lend themselves to the good of our public, and things like being able to do some exercises in the park in the early hours when it's not heavily used, and things like that would be good to see. So I'd love to see that policy come forward, and I'll look forward to that. The second thing I had was the Housing Commission did do a visit to Basalt Vista up in Basalt. And that's the housing project up there that was a partnership between the school district and Pitkin County, and I think town of Basalt, and then Habitat for Humanity. It was very impressive. And some of the commission and staff went up just to see the project and see kind of how they put it together, what the units were like, and it was fantastic. So again, the commission is moving forward kind of on this concept for a pilot project in Glenwood Springs. If it could end up being something similar to that, we'll see where that goes, but we are looking forward to having a work session with council pretty soon. And hopefully that's maybe in May. Deborah, do you know if that's on the agenda, on the schedule yet for work sessions?
I know we're looking at it this week. I honestly cannot remember currently where it's at.
Okay. We were aiming for the second meeting in May or first meeting in June, if we can get that.
Ben just texted me, May 20th is when it is on the agenda.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah, because the commission needs some direction from council on where to go with that project. And then the last one I had is just been out a lot more now with the spring and the nice weather and getting out walking around, and just in the downtown neighborhood, particularly the south of the river, but northeast neighborhoods up the streets from about 10th to 7th, and Palmer, Minter, and Garfield up that way. Some of the potholes are just horrendous, and particularly 9th Street. I think there's one the size of probably 2 parked cars where a whole section of the roadway has failed. And so I'd like to find out, I've had some complaints on that, and just seeing those, I'm wondering if those potholes are going to get filled or if not, I'd like to find out when those roads are scheduled for some kind of an upgrade, because it really is getting almost impassable for some of those, especially those narrow little streets like Minter.
Matt has raised his hand.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if you will pull him over.
Thanks.
Pulled over enough to talk.
There we go. Alyssa beat me to
Hi,
it.
Matt.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So yes, they are on the schedule. We're running the pothole crew 2 to 3 days a week right now. Since the sweeper was actually broken for the first almost 4 weeks, we've been running that a little bit heavier than running the pothole crew at this moment. But yes, that side of town is on the schedule. They're kind of done, we'll call it the Red Mountain area. They hit North Glenwood, West Glenwood, and they're heading back that direction. So it should be in the next week or two that we get up there. I can ask Jake about it just to make sure that he's got it on the schedule, but I've seen the same potholes as you has driving around. So we're just kind of doing the spring, we'll call it pothole repair situation. So yes, it's on the schedule.
Is it possible to fix that real big one? I don't know if you're that one on 9th that's like parked car size or bigger.
It's on 9th and what?
9th, it's just east of Palmer.
Okay.
Yeah, so just maybe take a look at that one and anything.
Nope, I'll drive up and take a look at that one tomorrow. If it's that big, I would have thought we would have gotten to it by now. So I will have a conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right. Ingrid.
So here recently, I had some folks approach me and visit about the bank on Grand Avenue that's obviously in process of being built, and just so much energy and opinions during that time. One thing that came from it that I think that we maybe let kind of die away was a dialogue about that GID, and maybe a recommendation coming from planning and zoning on maybe how to just like keep that area a little bit more vibrant with a little more vitality, and maybe businesses, smaller businesses, or some different dynamic. I'd love to reconnect with planning and zoning and see if they have any recommendations for us on code revisions to that GID that would maybe encourage more diversity, and definitely it's a good timing with the comp plan as well. So I just wanted to put that out there and see kind of if that stuck with any of you guys to give direction to planning and zoning, or encourage planning and zoning to look at that. And then at that same time, and we're obviously going to be touching on a lot of those recommended code revisions later this evening, but I also would love to have planning and zoning give us some recommendations on zoning ordinances or zoning changes for density. Maybe, I know that there's been talk and stirring about second ADUs, and I don't want to create a big hoopla about it, but I would like to look at out of the box alternatives and ideas and really keep that energy and momentum going with planning and zoning, talking about current trends in communities to accommodate and offset this really desperate need we have for affordable housing. So those are my two wish list items this evening.
Just real quick, Ingrid, so you know, DDA and the Planning Commission are meeting on Monday to have that conversation about the downtown.
Great.
So that's already rolling.
Okay. I just love that. Like, that's efficiency.
All right. Councilor Hershey.
So I'm starting my timer, Mr. Mayor, 3 minutes. I wish Shelley Kaup would use that timer when she has her 16 questions. Shelley, you could have easily asked that question to anybody, and hours ago. And Ingrid, you ask a question that we already have an answer to, but a person in the public isn't allowed to ask a question. So I guess I'm going to ask a question. Carl, is anywhere are these things written down, these ordinances regarding city parks, or is it just a policy that's sort of like in the ethereal mist? Because a police detective contacted that person who was allowed to speak and interrogated her about a potential crime. So I don't know what the crime is. Was there an ordinance violation, Mr. Hanlon? Or is there a policy or a law that says you can't engage in this kind of behavior in a park?
It would be both, actually, Counselor. And I think from the standpoint of having somebody contact and have a conversation so they understood what was going on, there's very few tools that I have available to me to try to figure those things out. So that would be the reason for.
I just get concerned when Carl and Mr. Mayor, I get concerned when a citizen who's not doing anything wrong is contacted by the police. If the police contact me, I would tell them to call my attorney, Mr. Willman, but I would not expect someone to call me for something that might be an ordinance violation or something. But that was my concern. So maybe I agree with Shelley. This is something that we need to talk about further, and I asked that be brought up at another meeting. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Counselor. And that was the point I was making when I spoke to Paula's questions regarding the same thing, is that Brian and I are working on bringing back a more streamlined version of the code and also the parks regulations that would allow us to both permit this activity so that we knew what was going on in our parks, if that was the will of council, as well as make sure that the public sees some benefit from that as well. So again, asked and answered under Paula's comments.
I didn't make an objection, Mr. Hanlon, but I appreciate it. Asked and answered.
That's some fun lawyerese. Love having 3 attorneys on the screen. Any other council comments? All right. I have a couple of comments. One, I have really noticed a lot of signs. We waived our sign codes going into COVID. And the one that really kind of sticks out to me is and maybe it doesn't stick out to anybody else, but there's a commercial property for sale at the 27th Street roundabout that has a massive integrated property sign. It's got to be like 8 feet by 5 feet. Clear violation of what was our sign code before we waived it. I think we waived it indefinitely. I still see some And I love to see that the pride that people have for Shelley and Ricky, but there's still signs out there. I'm seeing less of them. I see a lot of Save Our Pasture. Not yours? Okay, I think I took. Okay, okay. And I see a lot of Save Our Pasture signs that have been up for 3 or 4 months now. Again, in violation of the code that is waived. So no one's doing anything wrong. No one's going to get a call from anybody yet. Don't strip Glenwood Springs. Take a minute campaign. Don't mind our community has tons of signs, and they're left over from campaign after campaign and campaign. So I would like to, and I think all those campaigns are great, but I would love to see if we could get a vote to reinstate our sign code now that we're back to some semblance of normal, and we're just getting a lot of junky signs everywhere, and our code enforcement doesn't even have the tools right now to enforce a sign that's clearly outside the parameters that have nothing to do with community activism even. So would anybody be interested in directing the, okay.
Second.
I see a second from Steve Davis. I see a hand up from Tony. Does anybody else care to reinstate our sign code? Shelley, is that a question or do you agree? Okay. Staff, do you need a vote of us to reinstate that sign code? Okay, well, all right. Motion by myself, seconded by Councilor Davis. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks all. I also want to thank staff. I took part in the community-wide cleanup on Saturday. I know some other folks might have helped with that, but I saw Deborah and Jen and Brianna and Matt Langhorse and a ton of our firefighters out there. Trent, I shouldn't even name names because I saw so many people out there, and if I leave anybody out, I'm excluding them. But made a lot of progress at the 114 interchange around the community center, and there's a lot of junk out there, but I do see a lot of folks, a lot of groups that are doing it. So thank you very much, whatever group you're in, however you're doing it. It's pride in our community, and man, it's been looking junky, and I don't know if it's a COVID thing or what, but I want to specifically thank our staff for spending a really long, hot day doing that. And I didn't spend all day doing it. I popped in and did a few bags and had to pop out, but thank you very much to staff. Any other comments? Okay. Back to the agenda item. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
A motion by Ingrid, seconded by Shelley. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, next item is item number 11, Police Week Proclamation. Let me get to that on my second screen here. I don't have the fancy screens that everybody has. Apologies, guys, sorry. Okay. Whereas, this is a City of Glenwood Springs proclamation, whereas the Congress of the United States has designated May 15th of each year to be Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. And whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated women and men of Glenwood Springs Police Department. And whereas the City of Glenwood Springs wishes to recognize National Police Week 2021 and honor the service and sacrifice of those law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy. And whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., and whereas 264 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Memorial Wall this spring. And now, therefore, I, Jonathan Godis, Mayor of Glenwood Springs, and on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby do proclaim May 9th through the 15th, 2021 as Police Week in the city of Glenwood Springs, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in the city of Glenwood Springs and communities across the nation. It loses so much not being in person. We really do appreciate our police force and Chief Darris and all your officers. We thank you so much. Okay, next item on the agenda is the John Logan Bartek Proclamation Week. Proclamation, it's not a week. You don't get a whole week yet.
Mr. Mayor, do you want to promote both Ken and Logan quickly?
You know what? I would love to do that. I would love for Ken to talk about this. Ken, you're allowed to talk.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and I am not able to. There we go. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Some of you may not know Logan. He's been the man behind the scenes, basically helping coordinate all these COVID plans to open up Hanging Lake and the Maroon Bells, both two huge economic drivers in our valley. And Logan has been phenomenal behind the scenes, developing the training programs for our staff last year and the visitors to participate in those areas safely during all the COVID situations. And something to be commended upon. Between both areas, we had over 160,000 visitors and approximately 40 full-time staff. Not once did an employee get any COVID scenarios, nor was any contact tracing back to those two areas. So all those plans put in order, where Logan was very much involved in those. And I nominated him to the state to receive the Tourism Employee of the Year, one of 10 employees picked through all sectors, from food and beverage to resort. And the state selected him as one of their top frontline workers for 2020, and he well deserves it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Logan, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you would like to say anything, you're more than welcome to, or I can read the proclamation and you can say something afterwards if you'd like. Okay, there you go.
Hey, you can read it, but thank you, Mayor, and I couldn't have done it without the other partners and everybody else.
Awesome. That is, we need more speeches like that probably on City Council. All right, this is a proclamation honoring John Logan Bartek, aka Logan. Whereas Logan is originally from Evanstonville, Indiana, having moved to Glenwood Springs in 2012, and whereas Logan, working as a game developer for Glenwood Escape Room, is referred to as a computer wizard. He has also recently received his pilot's license, and whereas Logan graduated from Purdue University with a degree in mechanical engineering, this is impressive, technology, and is currently the general manager of Glenwood Springs Adventure Company and logistics and IT manager for H2O Ventures. And whereas Logan was instrumental in developing the customer service programs during COVID-19 that allowed Hanging Lake and Maroon Bells to stay open. And whereas Logan is one of 10 people across the state who were designated Colorado Tourism Officer's Top Frontline Worker Award. And whereas Logan was honored during a webinar for the National Travel and Tourism Week. And whereas Logan will be featured on the Colorado Tourism Official Office website, I think it means official website, their Facebook page, as well as their newsletters. Therefore, be it resolved, I, Jonathan Godis, Mayor of Glenwood Springs in the state of Colorado, ask all of our city residents to join me in proudly honoring and celebrating Logan for his profound accomplishments. Thank you, Logan. We're very proud to have you in our community, and it's a great honor and recognition. Ken, you run a great business. You have great people, always. And I hope that always stays that way. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Again, we're very happy to be able to do that. All right, next item is item number 13, planning file 6920, consideration of a special use permit for a retail marijuana establishment at 2114 Grand Avenue. Who is presenting? Who do I need to promote? I see hands going up. Okay, Trent and Chris.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Trent Hyatt with Community Development. I'm not sure, did you want to promote me to a presenter? Or that way I can share my screen with you, please?
I do want to do that. I'm trying to find you. Sorry. Can you raise your hand, Trent? I think you are promoted. Are you not promoted as a panelist?
I am now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to the rest of the City Council. I'm going to share my screen with you. I have a short presentation this evening. But again, this is the Kind Castle special use permit application, planning file number 6920. A little bit of history on this application. You may remember last summer there was a similar yet different application that was denied by City Council 5-2. That followed a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission for a 7-0 denial. However, the applicant addressed various issues and concerns that were outlined by both bodies and requested a resubmission by City Council. City Council deemed that application or the resubmittal was substantially and material different back in October of 2020, and then the applicant immediately submitted a revised application in November of last year. I will point out that some of the applicable regulations that you're going to be hearing tonight are actually prior to some more recent buffers that were implemented by the city back in December. So this applicant's application was in prior to those becoming effect. So they must adhere to the former buffer requirements. But again, this application is proposed at 2114 Grand Avenue on an approximately 0.4 acre site and a building that's approximately 3,000 square feet. Previously, the application only intended to occupy a portion of that site. However, the applicant has secured the right to lease the entire building and use all of those suites A, B, and C. They've also included some changes in wall locations and the actual layout of those suites. They are going to reserve some of that for office space. They're not going to use the entirety of the property for the licensed retail marijuana establishment. Section 70-20-30E, table 30.1 does outline a retail marijuana establishment as a use requiring a special use permit in the M1 zone district, which this property is zoned, as are all of the properties to the north, south, east, and west of the site. So just to talk a little bit about some of the differences in this application as opposed to the previous one, the applicant now proposes basically to upgrade the front facade of the building, as you can see in the picture below. Now, this is not a specific elevation. They will provide those details at a later date, but it does give some guidance as to the theme of the improvements they would like to make. They also would like to eliminate the existing freestanding sign at the site that does, conflict a little bit with site distances in and out of Grand Avenue. This use will actually result in a reduction in vehicle trips to the site because it is eliminating some of those additional uses. They also have offered to the city, and we recommend as a condition that access into the site be restricted to right in, right out only movements. As you know, currently it's pretty wide open there at the site. They also are going to restripe the parking, which will better improve circulation therein. Section 70-30-30E11 outlines those former regulations that are applicable, one requiring a city license. And previously, a marijuana establishment was not allowed within 500 feet of an existing public or private school. St. Stephen's School and or Columbine School are over 600 feet from this site. 900 feet was the limitation for proximity to another retail marijuana use, or marijuana use at all for that matter. And the closest one is actually Green Dragon, which is 3,000 feet to the southeast of the site. D, the hours of operation shall be from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Sign permits must be required for any new signage at the site. The storage of retail marijuana shall not exceed 25%, which they do not propose to do. And there shall be no discernible odor that projects beyond the exterior of the licensed premises. Again, this is always a concern with these uses, and we recommend a condition to try to address that. Also, it's important to point out that the applicant is proposing significant odor mitigation that, they can provide more details about this, but it is estimated to be twice what is needed for the actual space that they are going to operate the use. You also must adhere to the general special use permit criteria. I being compatibility with the surrounding area. This area does combine a mix of retail and service uses. It also lodging, multifamily residential, as well as automobile fuel cells to the site. And these are uses that you will typically find in proximity to a state highway, in this case being 82, directly adjacent to the site. Impacts have been adequately minimized. Again, that's that potential odor concern that we always try to address. And in this circumstance, the applicant is certainly making some improvements that we have requested and discussed for access, circulation, and the general aesthetic. Consistent with the general purpose and intent of the code, it seems to be, and compliance with applicable standards. V, conformance with the comprehensive plan. The site is designated as commercial, and the use does seem to address numerous community goals and or objectives identified to meet those goals, such as economic development, maintaining our city as the regional center of the county, and preserving our small town character, convenient transportation, infill development, social diversity, as well as preserving natural resources. I know sometimes it may seem like, well, what do these have to do with any of those uses outlined therein? But really, a lot of these various goals are addressed simply by infill development within the city and the benefits that we see from that. 6, minimizes adverse impacts to health, safety, and welfare. And we have not identified any that are associated with this use. We received comments on this application from both CDOT and the engineering department. CDOT addressed the need for an access permit potentially, as well as the access control plan that identifies that this property shall combine entrances, ingress and egress entrances with the property to the south, at which time one or the other is redeveloped. One thing that we've tried to do to address that is to require an easement along the southern property boundary of this site in order to facilitate that in the future if that, if that is proposed at some point. The engineering department, again, also outlined the need for the access easement and circulation improvements at the site, which the applicant addressed following the receipt of those comments. We received from the public some comments in opposition to this from Garfield and Hecht, Virginia Guerra, and Barbara Kozol. And we did receive some comments in support of this application from Scott Dillard, Roger Titmus with Stinker Stores, which is located to the south. There are 12 petitions supporting the application in your packet. We also received comments in support from Renee Tornero and Katie Cropid. Section 706030 G1D allows City Council to approve with conditions, or deny the application. You also certainly can continue the application and a request for additional information. Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the application at both their February and March meetings and recommended to City Council that they approve this application with a vote of 5-1. Staff recommends approval of conditions of action item 1 with the findings and conditions that were included in your staff report. pages 9 and 10 of the staff report from the Planning and Zoning Commission packet, but that is obviously likely a different application. In your packet, we did also include some typical suggested motions for both approval as well as denial. Now, that being said, I think tonight you will be continuing this item regardless to allow for the opportunity for future public comment, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions. Looks like we have Charlie and then Shelley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Trent, I have a couple, actually 3 questions. I noticed a reference by the traffic engineer for the applicant critiquing the traffic count by SGM. I didn't see the SGM report in there. Can you give me a summary of why the traffic count by the applicant, the vehicle number count was by the applicant was better than the SGM?
Yeah, and I certainly the applicant can provide additional details, but my recollection of that, Charlie, is that the traffic and consultant for the applicant actually used real world examples of traffic related to this use, whereas the one identified in the SGM report by one of the opponents of the application was more of a general related use. So they use real world marijuana related businesses to generate their estimated traffic increase.
Okay. Second question, you talked about this easement, in common easement with the property, the gas station. If that is granted in the future, won't that affect parking? And how do we handle that in an approval of an application?
It potentially could impact traffic and circulation at this site, Charlie, but really it would only be intended for use if both of these sites were redeveloped. So to allow for combined access. And, you know,
So
the form of that easement will likely need to be loose. If you look at the condition, it's, you know, to meet the approval of the city engineer. So, you know, I'm sure there'll be, you know, whether it's a memorandum of understanding or an agreement. I don't know that it could completely be, you know, a real true access easement, but, you know, some form that just gives us some power in the future to initiate that if need be.
All right. If it requires both parties to be redone, I guess that answers my question. The third question I have is, and I looked at some of the videos by one of the opponents, Cedar Lodge, and the people stopping at Cedar Lodge and hopping out of their car and jumping over the little short wall and going in the store. And I sure can understand the concern of the neighbor in that regard. Can we make a requirement that the applicant put up a fence along that area so it doesn't encourage people to do it? It's a lot easier to pull up to Cedar Lodge, jump over the little wall and go in and get your products and then go back out than it is to try to pull in and exit, because you can go all the way around the loop at Cedar Lodge. So can we put something in there that would say they got to put a fence up or vegetation would be even better, dense vegetation, to try to keep people from going in between those two properties?
Yeah, you certainly could. I mean, that would be an impact, or that would be addressing or mitigating a potential issue related to the application. So I think you could, you know, a fence with landscaping, booby traps, you know, something along those lines.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Booby traps. I like it. Shelley, go ahead.
I was going to say booby traps, really? Okay. I think the main question I had was, do we know where the employees are going to park? Are they, and how many employees are on site at any one time? I wasn't clear in getting
Yeah, and you know, I think that the applicant could maybe follow up on that one for you a little bit better, Shelley. You know, just based on the code itself, the required parking for this use should be able to incorporate that needed for customers as well as the employees. And one of the benefits of the current application is that they've eliminated some of the other uses that may conflict or, you know, be in conflict or try to use some of those spaces.
Okay. And then I do see that that condition was added for the right in, right out. But I had a similar question as Charlie. Do we need some condition to keep customers from parking over at the hotel site? So maybe I'll reserve that for question to the applicant also. Thanks.
Thanks, Shelley. Paula, go ahead.
Karen, would you address I'm just thinking that I read it, but I can't put my finger on it, that there was something about the parking and the concern of the fire department kind of getting in and out. Was that addressed?
I don't know that is specifically been addressed in the former application. But in terms of the parking itself, I would state that it's generally improved, again, because of the elimination of other uses at the site.
Okay, so fire trucks getting back to the residents or that type of stuff, that's what I'm concerned about, is that availability when you have the cars parked at an angle or right angle or however it is now, that they wouldn't have a problem.
I don't think that any of the circulation changes that are proposed are negatively impacting circulation. If anything, they've improved them. And I do want to point out, there kind of has to, in my mind anyway, in terms of reviewing this use, today it's used for various commercial retail uses as is, and we always try to have a balance between what we would require just because it's a different use that requires a SUP versus what would be required if it was just simply a change of use that came, through our office. So to me, to make significant changes for that particular item may be a little above and beyond what we would normally do.
Okay, I was more concerned about the change in parking, and that kind of came up when I was reading it, but thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I have one question. I've gotten complaints, I believe, about odor from marijuana production facilities. But I'll just speak for myself. I've never gotten a complaint about the retail locations in town as far as odor goes. Do you have a sense, Trent, maybe just anecdotally, do we get a lot of or significant or any actually complaints on retail marijuana? Because it seems like smell is always the concern. And what is that? Can you quantify that with existing retail locations?
I can. To our knowledge, Mayor, we've only actually since 2011 or 2012, whenever this use was allowed in the city, we've only received one complaint, and the investigation of that complaint actually found that it wasn't related to the retail establishment itself, but it was someone that was smoking marijuana in public.
Some hard-hitting investigative work there. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. Would the applicant like to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. Is it okay if I share my screen as well?
Please, that'd be great.
Thank you. So my name is Chris Hawkins with Alpine Planning. Thank you for considering this tonight. Let me pull up my presentation, sorry. So I think you're familiar with the team that's on the packet. We really appreciate Apex Consulting Engineers really diving into the traffic patterns. They evaluated several stores in the town and looked at the trip generation and really justified those numbers in the traffic report. So we feel very comfortable with that given the current traffic patterns that are generated by your existing store. I think everyone's familiar with the store site right here, commercial area of the city. The existing conditions, I'm glad that was raised earlier. This is a current condition, but any fire truck that comes in here is not going to try to get to the back here. If there's a fire, truck's not going to pull around back here. They'll either pull up on Grand Avenue and block a lane, or they'll stage out front here. And then generally the rule of thumb is 150 feet for hoses. And if you measure, if a truck stages from here, it can get 150 feet around this way. And then if they did need to stage, they could also stage in the hotel parking lot and just break through the fence and get back here. They really ignore property lines in emergencies. So that's a non-issue. The existing condition today is Suite A, B, and C. I think everyone's familiar with that, with the really lovely sign, Stinker's gas station, and then the fence. And then the sides of the buildings. Nice little picture of dinosaurs and signs and ammo. And then what we're proposing is a complete refurbishment of the storefront to really create a nice, more modern appearing building. This will not happen if this doesn't get approved. It will sit as it is with the current owner, and it'll just be rented out over time. So this is a huge community benefit to improve this part of the city that does need some attention, just because of some of the aging commercial businesses. And that plan contrasts the concept from today to what's envisioned for the future, with stone, stucco, and again, some metal siding, etc. So a much better storefront. And then it actually wraps around the side of the building a little bit to the back on either side. This is something the Planning Commission wanted to see, but we're also talking about repainting the building. It needs some attention if you've looked at it on both sides. Leaving the landscaping on the hotel side. We thought about a fence all the way on that side, but it would have just taken out too much landscaping. This was our initial parking plan we submitted, and city staff really had great recommendations to improve the parking. And so this was the actual plan that city staff had suggested we take a look at, where we basically go to more of a perpendicular parking, and we get the actual required 24-foot wide width, and this is per fire code. So we are meeting code, and then it does get a little bit tight when you go to the rear access area. And so we're also, in terms of the parking space, this gets out there a little bit and messes with a little bit of stuff. And what happens is the sign pushes parking back. So one of the other public improvements that we see, at least, is getting rid of what is a blighted sign and replacing it with a single sign in this general location. But looking at more of this plan, which is the perpendicular parking with all these spaces meeting standards. And we do have 2 compact parking spaces right here. And our goal was to try to keep as much turning radius to the back here as possible with that and keep it open. So we're providing more than 12 feet between the sidewalk and here. But this is, if you basically have to stop and see if anyone's out. I would note that there is dedicated parking spaces in the back for both the apartments, a couple spaces back there, as well as for employees. And the average number of employees is about, my client texted me, it's 3 to 4 on site average is the average number of employees. So we've got more than enough back here for the residences and the employees, plus the parking up front for guests. So part of this was putting in a fence. Booby traps would be fun, but probably not a good idea. But we do intend to install a fence per city code. It'll have to taper down out here to not block sight distance, but also put a no parking sign on the back here. And the store will help enforce on that. There'll be security cameras out here, and if any guests do come in from out there, store staff will be trained to make sure that they don't do that. They move their cars, because we do have to respect private property in the area. The floor plan, you've seen this in the packet, a lobby area, retail sales space. This is A and B, suites B and C. And then suite A actually isn't part of the licensed premise. It will be used just as an office for the manager. And the managers typically in the stores are working managers. They're just not sitting in there. They're actually working in the retail space, et cetera, managing employees, making sure everything is met. One key thing I want to point out on this is the extensive air filtration that's used. There's these freestanding units that basically are treating a lot of the air, these AF3000C units. And then there's some air purifier units as well that are spread throughout the store. This is total overkill, but we do not want there to be any issues with that. Also reconstructing this back wall with a new vapor barrier and putting up drywall to ensure there's no odor migrating into the apartments in the back, as well as odor mitigation around the storage room too. The HVAC system also has its own carbon filtration system that treats the conditioned space too for all the air flowing through the building. So you're seeing a plan that is very conscious of odor mitigation, and it will not be an issue. So we have all these things that I was just talking about, basically 8 independent units in the HVAC carbon filtering unit. So odor will not be an issue at all. Again, there's just some nice pictures of some of these units we were just showing you. They hang up on the ceiling. Not exactly the most attractive thing, but they're functional and they work. Again, just more details on odor mitigation in terms of basically we have 12,000 square feet of odor mitigation for 2,560 square feet. So complete overkill, but we don't want there to be any question about it. So we already talked about the floor plan. Compatibility is always an issue to talk about with these stores. It's located in an intensive mixed-use residential and commercial area. Talked about the new attractive commercial storefront that will improve the blighted appearance of the property. Again, a new wood or metal 3-foot to 6-foot tall fence along the front parking area to buffer property and discourage parking, and the private parking sign on the other side of the fence. We'd like to hear from the hotel owner on their desired fence design and sign design, but if they don't want to provide input, we'll still put one up with the no parking sign and with the fence, just to make sure that these people are discouraged from parking from over there. Removal of the current blighted signage, new pole mounted sign, the less traffic generated than historic use is a pretty big one. Improved parking lot design and improved egress. And there'll also be space for bike parking on the property too. A lot of cyclists come to John's stores. So again, the mechanical conditioning to mitigate odor, no odor complaints, which was discussed earlier. And again, state-of-the-art security, fire, and carbon monoxide systems. These are installed in all of the Kind Castle stores with surveillance cameras all around. And this helps not only with things that we haven't heard about in the state yet, which is a lot of crime with these stores, but also too with managing the site to make sure no one's loitering or no one's parking where they shouldn't be parking. So we also are providing a little over 2 times more parking than required. I already talked about the odor mitigation. We also have received written support from the current residential tenants. That's in your packet. That's huge. They fully support the store. So any concerns from attorneys or hotel owners about their well-being is addressed. They're fine with it, and we're mitigating the impacts of this. In terms of compatibility, we wanted to look at where has the city found retail marijuana stores compatible with surrounding area development. Here's the Green Dragon, and this is on the South Glen Avenue store. It's located by a motel, a Walmart, a retail center with restaurant, a mixed-use retail building with AutoZone, Colorado Electric Supply, auto repair, and the Conoco gas station. So lots of active uses around here. Just another shot of it, just the stores over here to the left. The Green Joint, 1030 Grand Avenue. It's located in a residential area. It's on a very busy corner area with commercial across the street to the west, and that's primarily restaurants. Was before at least what's happened. I'm not sure what they are now. Hopefully they're still restaurants. And here's an image of it. And when I checked on the assessor's site, they were showing this still having a residential use component to it. So we haven't confirmed that with the owners, but the assessor's data at least reflected that. Doctor's Garden, 716 Grand Avenue. This is in the central business district. This is in the tourist hub of the area, next to restaurants and retail, and there's a plaza area right in front of it. Again, it's in this building right here. I believe the assessor data also indicated residential uses were still there, but this is in your main district. And again, it's, I think a lot of people would look at this and just saying they're becoming part of the landscape in mountain communities of Colorado. The other Kind Castle store that was approved over on Wolfshun. This is right across the road from a hotel. Again, real close proximity and in a residential area, and we had full support of the hotel owners for that project. So again, any store impacts are minimized through odor control, more than adequate parking. There's also parking available on 22nd Street now with parallel parking. We don't anticipate this being used, but it is available if it's ever needed. In the vapor barrier, the new facade, the improved parking plan recommended by the city engineering department, the right in, right out. We're also sealing, repairing, and restriping the parking lot. That parking lot's pretty bad. Getting rid of the sign and then the wider curb cut. Again, the historic PM traffic was 31 vehicles. Our traffic engineers are showing an estimate of 25 vehicles, which is about a 19% reduction. And we're proposing the installation of this sign with a curb design that's approved by CDOT to force right in, right out traffic. And again, we're more than willing to grant whatever easements are needed for the site. We've already talked that through with the current landowner. The store is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the development code. The code was really set up to protect the public health, safety, and welfare with your buffer zones, et cetera. And we comply with all the standards that were in effect when we submitted it. There are no standards for other uses, even though attorneys think that certain uses might be morally impacted by stores. Your regulations don't set forth any standards to protect other uses. So you really can't make up, oh, well, there's this use and it's going to be somehow impacted. Housing is not displaced by the store, and we're meeting all the use specific standards and requirements of the code, and natural hazards have been mitigated with the development. I did want to point out the license has been approved by the state marijuana enforcement division, which is good. The buffer requirement was met for those that were in effect. For the stores, we're more than 30,200 feet to the nearest store, which is Green Dragon. Stores over 600 feet away from the schools, which was what we're being evaluated by. The M1 zone district allows the use and will comply with all the operational requirements and details that are in your codes, as well as the state law. I wanted to point out this map because I think this map is really good, because your regulations were set up to not have a concentration of these and spread them out throughout the city and limit numbers. And there's a big donut right here where there's not a store. If you approve the store, which we hope you will, this will effectively be the last store in this corridor going up. So it's pretty obvious for this. And if you look at where liquor stores or other stores are at, they're spread throughout a community to encourage walkability, pedestrian activity, and just satisfy market demand. Use specific standards, hours of operation, the sign permit, storage area, and odor mitigation will be met. The comprehensive plan, Trent already talked on this. The scale of the facility really helps maintain the small town character. I know the hotel owners believe it will affect the character of the area and understand that. These stores have just become a part of the landscape in Glenwood Springs, and they have not impacted tourism at all. There's an email that was sent to you. I don't think you got it. It was from, let me know if you can see this email that I just pulled up.
We can.
Okay. So this is from Kate Kropoid. She's a hotel manager, and I'm just going to read this into the record real quick. My name is Kate, and I'm a Glenwood resident. I want to share my thoughts regarding Kind Castle's business application at 2114 Grand Avenue and advocate for its approval. As a manager at an area hotel, supporting tourism is incredibly important to me in this valley, and the recreational marijuana industry in this area only helps contribute to that. Additionally, I've noticed an influx of young professionals moving to the area and believe that any new business helps to provide jobs to these newcomers and further stimulate the economy. I've heard people raise concerns over odor, yet over my time living here, they've not found to be an issue at any other marijuana establishments in the city. And I'm sure it would not be an issue at this location either, as it is not a cultivation property. Along the same lines, I've never experienced any negative feedback from Glenwood visitors regarding the existence of establishments already in the area. It seems to me that the addition of another would only appeal to those who utilize those services and have no negative effect on those who do not. and the extra tax revenue for the city doesn't hurt. Lastly, I personally think having a single commercial occupant of that parcel is ideal for the aesthetic and accessibility reasons. Thank you. So thank you for letting me read through that. I'm not going to go through the economic development and all the positive benefits. I think you understand that and how this meets the comprehensive plan. I did want to comment that, you know, the engineering department's looking at this, and they've basically we've fixed the one concern they had, and we will deal with the right in, right out. CDOT has no concerns with this comment, or has no concerns or comments with the development, which is huge. There are lots of letters of support, the 2 residents. There are 3 emails, letters of support, about 9 affidavits. There's about 16 total in support. We think we're going to get with Trent and just make sure they're all in the packet and that you have an opportunity to read it before you make a decision. I've already gone through the other stores and their proximity to other housing. As far as public comments go, the location of the retail marijuana store is not a moral question. Stores are evaluated based on prescriptive and objective standards. Several other stores have been approved in way more visible locations with a higher concentration of stores. And basically we have a lot of buffering pursuant to the regulations which were being evaluated. And other stores have been approved with the same site context in terms of compatibility with less buffering and higher concentration. We exceed the prescriptive standards, and we think that since the other store sites were found to be compatible, that this site should be found to be compatible as well. And really think that your spatial distance requirements are really key to ensuring the appropriate mix and number of stores in the city. There's no limit on the number of shops in the city. The city also determined that the application is materially different, and it's really not a consideration for this special use permit. That's a past action, and not sure why that was being raised again, other than information for the council and new council members. Tourism is not impacted. There's no safety issues. And as I'm getting a little redundant, so I'm going to move on. A few other comments I just need to make real quick, so please bear with me. Okay, I managed to cover all my client's comments without looking at his comments, so I did good. So thank you very much for indulging me.
All right, thank you very much. Looks like Ingrid has a question. You're muted, Ingrid.
Thought I hit it. If you could touch on, you briefly mentioned increased crime at these kind of locations. I think you mentioned that when you were talking. Can you?
Yeah, just one of the comments was like, it's going to be a decrease in public safety and, more or less crime. We have not seen that in any locations in Colorado where there's increased crime caused by a retail marijuana store. And the safety concerns that from the hotel next door regarding added traffic to and from the intersection we've addressed, we believe.
Sure. And this will now be the second Kind Castle location?
It will be. There's other stores that have 2 locations in the city. It's for just to have similar market advantages you've already approved in the city.
So, and what's the time frame that you guys, if you were approved this evening, if memory serves, you're building over at the Kind Castle in the Meadows, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that store, we're probably about, I'm guessing roughly, once we get permits 6 months out from that, plus a couple months. So we're 8 months out. This store probably could be operational earlier than that, but the intent is to move as quickly as allowed. We have to be considerate of current leases that may be in place. And, but yeah, we'd move fairly quickly to start the remodeling process.
Sure. And proportionately, like I'm sure you guys have all these numbers, so maybe you can share them with me. Proportionately, like, do you know a percentage of people within most communities that take advantage of marijuana products? And do you feel
going to see if we can promote John Diet to a panelist, because he is that question I cannot answer. And hang on, let me give you his phone number real quick.
And you know what, for the sake of time and
no, His number is 970-773-5463. If you could promote him to be able to speak as a panelist, that would be good. Or if he raises his hand.
I see it, but Ingrid, if you withdraw your question, then I don't see need.
I'm just going to withdraw my question. And thank you
Okay,
so much.
sorry, I just don't know.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Planners don't know those things, sorry.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Okay, great. I think I've got my questions answered. Thank you.
Paula, go ahead.
Just a quick question. You're renting, right? If this is approved, you guys would be renting, not buying. It's just
Correct,
a lot of.
Correct, it'd be a long-term lease.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right.
Okay, if I could, Your Honor, real quick, to the extent we could reserve the right to rebut at your next meeting, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, we always allow you're able to do that if there's any public comment from the public.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have any questions? I do not. All right, is there anybody from the public that would like to, wait, Carl, we're closing this. No, we're taking public comment. Then we're going to close it, and then yes, okay, thanks. We've only done this 100 times during COVID. Is there anybody from the public who would like to comment? I got it. Ms. Carmer.
Thank you, Mayor Godis. My name is Haley Carmer. I'm an attorney here in Summit Springs. I represent the Cedar Lodge Motel, which, as you've heard tonight, is the property we're talking about. We respectfully disagree with the applicant that this particular use is compatible with the area in which it's proposed. While there are other stores in town that may be close to hotels or other lodging, none of them share a property boundary like this one does, nor is there another facility that shares a boundary with lodging and multifamily, and has multifamily or has residential uses in the exact same building. So use because you're supposed to, the purpose of the review is to look at the unique aspects of the particular site and not compare it necessarily to anywhere else in town. So we would urge you to consider the unique aspects of this particular property and how it is different from the other facilities that the applicant has mentioned tonight. The parking is also a concern, even with the number of spaces. For that reason, we do want at least the condition to be added that the fence be built. Having that as an express condition will ensure that if this particular operator leaves and a new one comes in, that stays in place and is enforceable. And we would also ask that there be another condition added that if any of the conditions of approval are violated, that the council could consider revoking the permit for a violation of those conditions. Right now, the one condition that speaks to violations only speaks to odor and other code-related issues, but we think it's important to expressly mention that any violation of a condition of approval could result in revocation if it's found to have been violated. You'll also hear from the owners themselves tonight, but I think the biggest issue with this application that hasn't changed from the last one is just that its compatibility with what's going on here. The traffic that the applicant's consultant looked at a different facility had different site circulation as well. So just because the trips might be lower, and that again, that's not this particular facility, it's a different one, how that traffic affects this site is different because the circulation is different. So again, urging the council to just consider the unique aspects of this property, which is the purpose of this particular review tonight. And we do ask that you deny the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Let's see, I see two participants. One more participant with their hand raised. All right, your phone number. I don't know who you are, but give me your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. I think to unmute it's *9, I believe.
Phone number ending in 13, your mayor, Mr. Mayor, you're on.
Yeah, I've unmuted them. They are allowed to talk. So you're gonna need to punch in if you're a caller. You're gonna need to punch in *9. I think maybe *6.
Okay, perfect. Is that 4313? I apologize.
It is with a *6 or *9.
One of those, right? Okay,
Just
I'm so sorry. Perfect. Well, my name is Barbara Cozio, and I live at 2102 Grand Avenue in Glenwood Springs. And I am actually speaking on behalf of the owners of Glenwood Springs Cedar Lodge, like Kaylee said, Joseph and Maria Cozio. And I think they just really want to stress to everyone on the call that the close proximity of the proposed sites will absolutely directly impact the owners, hotel guests, and the many families that live in our neighborhood. I know that somebody had addressed that they have tenant letters. Well, we in particular actually have an employee that works at Cedar Lodge, and their family has not been encountered. And I know that they do have concerns about potentially sharing a common wall with a pot shop on the other side. So this is probably not a very ideal situation for all the parties involved. And we do feel like this creates inherent risk to all of the tenants also living in adjacent rental units. And we just really urge you to consider this as a real concern, especially since they brought up that they had talked to the tenants and they have all of these tenant letters. And again, we will just stress that one of our employees happens to live there, and they were not approached. Additionally, most of our customers are families who travel with small kids. We have a lot of small kids running back and forth in our parking lot, enjoying the different pools and the picnic areas. And we have repeatedly pointed out that the increased traffic in our lot is caused by the horrible parking lot circulation next door. And I know that, again, they had brought up that it would probably be about 3 to 4 employees at any given time next door. But even 3 to 4 employees and the potential customers that are going there, that will probably absolutely cause a huge safety risk and liability for the owners at Cedar Lodge. Having different family members and multiple grandkids on site adds to the many concerns that the owners have, and absolutely this is a very personal and sensitive issue for them. So this is, just so everybody is aware, this is a very immigrant, family-owned business and operated business that has been in Glenwood Springs for over 30 years, and the owners take great pride in Glenwood Springs and the small town charm that it represents. And we would just like to also say that this would pretty much put us at one pot shop per 1,000 citizens in Glenwood Springs, and we do feel like this will absolutely send the wrong message to our visitors. We have spoken to other independent lodge owners and hotel owners who share the same concerns, and maybe they just have not reiterated that in the letters to you, but absolutely this is a very common thread among the independent lodge owners. Tourism is vital to our local community and contributes greatly to the financial needs of the city with our tax dollars. So trying to regain customers that are possibly turned off by the excessive numbers of pot shops is very hard to reclaim and probably isn't necessary.
Ma'am, if you could finish up your comments, your 3 minutes have expired.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I'm actually done. So we just strongly urge City Council to deny this special use permit for the reasons stated, and thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I know on the phone it's hard to see the timer, so I appreciate you working with us. All right, is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we will close public comment and we will look for a motion to continue this to the next meeting. Councilor Wusso.
Perfect. I am going to make a motion on planning file 69-20, consideration of a special use permit for a retail marijuana establishment at 2114 Grand Avenue, with a motion to continue to our rate.
I'm sorry, Ingrid. I would second that motion.
I wanted to give some clarity to the applicant on when we will do it too. Is it the next regularly scheduled meeting? Great. Okay, perfect. So we will continue that to the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Wusso, seconded by Councilor Hershey. Trent, can you please, Trent, sorry, I just saw your name there. Ryan, would you please call the question?
I'd be proud to be Trent. All right. Counselor Wusso,
Yes.
Counselor Stepp,
Yes.
Counselor Hershey,
Oui, monsieur.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilmot,
Yes.
Mayor Godis,
Yes.
Counselor Kaup.
Yes.
All right, unanimous.
All right. We'll have that continue to the next meeting. So item number 14 is ordinance number 2021-03 of the City of Glenwood Springs, amending a lot of titles. Is that good enough for the read it? All right. Who's presenting this and who do I need from? Oh, Gretchen.
Gretchen.
Yeah, go for it, Gretchen.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. If you'll indulge me a moment, I'm going to share my screen.
There we go, Gretchen.
There, sorry, so many buttons to push. So hopefully you can see the PowerPoint here. Beginning. Okay. All right. So as you all are aware, in 2018, we adopted a new development code. And as we continue to apply it to projects, we still find errors that require correction and provisions that need clarification or modification. And in this series of amendments, we are also recommending certain new provisions. So in addition to correcting the spelling and code reference errors, this series of amendments includes adding a design variance criteria, correcting and clarifying sign code requirements, renaming the construction plans review procedure, which has a name that has actually caused a lot of confusion with both staff and applicants. We are also adding portable storage container requirements, and then we're coordinating the development code with the engineering standards by removing certain duplications. And then finally, we're adding provisions for large and small scale solar installations. So I only intend to highlight 3 of the amendments that we're making with this series, but I would be happy, obviously, to discuss any of the particular changes with you, the ones that I'm not highlighting. So first is the addition of design variance criteria. The new code currently has 7 stringent criteria that all variances have to meet. These criteria apply to signs, design requirements, landscaping, and they also apply to zoning, which are the setback, building height, and lot size requirements. In our previous code, we held design variances in particular to a lesser standard than we did for zoning variances. The reasoning behind that was that the deviation from a required building design element, for example, wouldn't have the same potential impact as would a zoning variance, which might, like I said before, be a deviation from building height. So in applying the new code, the commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, realized that there is some benefit to having flexibility when considering variances from landscaping and building design requirements. So they are recommending that design variances meet all of the criteria that are listed here in section A, but only 4 of the 6 criteria listed in section B. And they felt that this should provide the flexibility that they desire, again, like I said, in building building design, and then also landscaping. Next, we recommend adding requirements for portable storage containers to address container use in commercial and industrial zone districts. This is to respond to their growing use by area businesses for storage of all kinds of things from tires to supplies and excess inventory. We've added placement criteria requiring that they be located at the rear or sides of buildings. They can be located within parking lots, but only allowing coverage of surplus parking spaces, not required parking spaces. We've added a maximum height allowance of 10 feet. We've stipulated that the containers cannot be stacked, and that we've added a maximum total coverage of 1,000 square feet. Finally, we've added some screening requirements, particularly that the containers that are in view of rights-of-way, customer parking areas adjacent to lodges, lodging uses, and residential zoning districts. And then finally, the solar installation provisions. These I want to highlight. They are new provisions in our code. We've added these solar installation systems to the land use table. We're allowing roof-mounted units in all zoning districts, and that's both large and small scale. And then for the large scale ground-mounted installations, we're requiring that they be a special review in commercial and industrial zoning districts, and that there be certain screening requirements, which are here, landscaping screening requirements. Finally, then we've also obviously included definitions for both types of installations. So the Planning and Zoning Commission considered these amendments at workshops held this past fall, and then at public hearings held in December and again in March. They've unanimously recommended that council approve these amendments with two findings that are shown here, and I'm not going to read them for you. And then they also appear in the Planning and Zoning staff report, which is in your packet. So as you all know, amendments to the municipal code are completed by ordinance. Therefore, I'm recommending that council uphold the commission's recommendation by adopting Ordinance 3, Series 2021, and this is the first reading. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and answer any questions that you might have.
Shelley.
Thank you, Gretchen. And I had sent some questions to Gretchen about, primarily, I had some concerns about the portable, I guess they're called portable storage units. And I sent questions, I think council was copied, those questions were put into the packet.
Yes, they were.
Okay. And I guess my main concerns on those, Gretchen, and thank you so much for answering those questions really well. That was helpful. But I do have concerns about a couple of things. First, that those, the use of those storage containers in commercial and industrial even, but other areas of town, that they're unsightly. And I have concerns about the height that we're allowing up to 10 feet high, but also allowing a number of them to essentially be adding 1,000 square feet onto the built, footprint on the property, when it's really kind of not going through permitting, not going through anything else, but it's just becoming, it's an added 1,000 square feet onto the use of the property. And I'm worried different things of those. They're actually taking those storage containers and turning to housing.
I think we're in the question phase because we're going to do public comment at some point. So
So my question is, what's the purpose of those, and why would we necessarily make it legal to add 1,000 square feet to these properties?
In my response, and I don't know if all of council had a chance to read because they were amended and included in the packet kind of late this afternoon. I think I responded that the 1,000 square feet can easily be changed to your purview, but the reasoning behind the 1,000 square feet is that it was consistent with what we allowed for accessory structures, specifically accessory dwelling units. And it truly is just a number. And I think in my response to you, Councillor Kaup, I had said that I believe that would allow 6 or 7 of the really large containers, the ones that are 16 feet long. And you asked about need, and to be honest, I'm actually seeing these pop up more and more. I'm not going to name the specific businesses, but we did have an enforcement action on one where they had put storage containers in front of their building, and we had them go through a special use permit in order to legalize those containers. So I'm seeing it as a growing issue in town. I cannot speak to their being used or abused as housing. I understand that back in the past, when I was working in the department, we had a number of complaints with regards to people renting out their sheds in the backyard, no plumbing, no heat or bootlegged heat and bootlegged electrical, and creating really substandard living conditions for folks. And we did end up enforcing the building code on that pretty frequently. And I hadn't considered that these storage containers would be abused for living purposes. And I think my only answer to that is that, number one, we're trying to address what we perceive as a need for the businesses, and then also create some screening requirements so they're not helter-skelter all over people's property, and that they address certain drainage concerns. They're not located in fire lanes. They're not occupying parking spaces that are required per code. So we're trying to control them somewhat.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so that's my answer, really.
For more discussion till we get into the comments.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
For answering that, yeah.
Hi, Charlie.
Thanks. Gretchen, just a couple of quick questions. And I didn't understand it. I think you explained it when I read the variance. So the variance only deals with design kind of standards. It doesn't allow for zoning variances except in meeting all 7 criteria. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the reasoning behind that is zoning is more sacrosanct than design.
Absolutely. That's correct.
And then my other question on the storage that Shelley was bringing up is there are several places that have storage units. Would this be applicable maybe for Carl or you, but would this be applicable to existing storage containers that are out there at properties? Could we enforce it?
I believe that we would be able to, because and I'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Some of the containers may be non-conforming, not legally non-conforming, just non-conforming. So we may have to do some enforcement action.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Charlie. Any other questions for staff at this time? All right, seeing none, we will open up public comment. Does anybody from the public, would anybody from the public like to comment on this item? No. Okay. We will now bring it back for future further council questions, comments, or motion. Go ahead, Councilor Davis.
Two comments. One is to Shelley's question about height. And, you know, a standard shipping container is 9 foot 6 inches tall. So to make that 10 feet, I mean, that just kind of fits the standard of a shipping container. The other one, there is some exceptions to the use, and the exceptions as described run to specifically for construction sites but it says that you would have to have a building permit in place. And, you know, I think there's times I can imagine in businesses where they're simply cleaning house or reorganizing, or they just took a large shipment of something and it takes some time. I think there should be an exception just for the temporary use. And maybe that's 30 days. I get a shipping container dropped off of Canoes, and it's just going to take me a little while to unload it before I can organize to have that container then picked up. Has nothing to do with remodeling or construction, really, but shipping containers are often used in this world, you know, to take delivery of items and maybe I just need to move my stuff out to refinish my floors. And the refinishing of floors in a business would not bring itself to the level of getting a permit to do that. So I really think we should add in there some kind of a temporary time in place to be able to set one without having to screen it. Those are my two comments.
Thanks, Councilor Davis. Shelley, I inadvertently lowered your hand. So you're next, and then Ingrid.
Okay. Yeah, just speaking to that, and I think Steve kind of is speaking to my concerns. I have concerns with allowing these on a permanent basis and businesses, and you know, not stacking them on top, because it says you can't stack them vertically, but basically using them side by side on a commercial site just to store your product. I think if a business is a long-term business in town and they need that much storage area in excess, you know, up to 1,000 square feet or more, they should build enclosed storage that looks decent and isn't just, you know, a row of shipping containers. So that's where I'm taking issue with it. And then there was a little bit about the wording, but I think if we can decide as a council how many square feet we want to allow on a site and whether or not they would be permanent, I think that would go a long way to alleviating my concerns.
Thanks, Shelley. Ingrid.
I just wanted to clarify or to better understand. So these can be used as, you know, if you pulled a permit, you could have this in place during the duration of the permitting time. Is that correct, Gretchen? So in lieu of a construction trailer, you could have this during that time. And if not, I feel like that alignment actually is pretty appropriate.
Right, that's correct. Councilor Davis was correct. There's an exemption if you have a open building permit and you need to store, for example, your tools or your inventory.
That's what I just wanted to confirm. For some reason, I was misinterpreting that. And then really mine is not as much of another question, but a comment, and that's just on the record, just gratitude to the Planning and Zoning Commission that worked through these items, because these are, in particular, the variance language, that was some work, and I just really appreciate their attention to detail and their expertise and the energy spent. So thank you, Planning and Zoning Commission. Thanks,
Ingrid. We have second comments from Shelley and Steve. Let me give my comments first before we go into the second, if we wouldn't mind. So I looked at the dimensions of a 8x40. So it's 320 square feet. So a 40-foot long shipping container would be 320 feet. So that would allow for 3 of the larger ones. And also standard size, Councilor Davis, is 8 feet 6 inches. I don't have a problem with it saying 10 feet, but if it is 8 to 6, maybe if people want it to be 9, that's fine. I think, I'd struggle a little bit because I see them, and I will call out where I see them, at Discount Tire. It's a successful business. It's been around for 5 years. You can't get an appointment there. They're so successful. And they've had permanent unsightly storage containers there for a long time. I've just noticed them pop up at the other tire shop in front of the mall, right off of, our entrance on 114th that they don't look good. They're not screened. They're not, anything that this actually kind of addresses. But then I also took a tour of Ken Murphy's new place, his retail location, and he has really, really nice high-end storage containers that are screened behind an opaque fence. They're clad with reclaimed lumber. They have roll-up doors. You would absolutely never know that these are storage containers at all. So I'm a little conflicted because when they're done nicely, it can be an addition to the property. And that's also a fairly industrial area with a transmission shop next door. Whereas Discount Tire or Big O Tires, that's a retail shopping area with car dealerships and the like. So I think where it is an important thing for me. And then I think the permanent aspect of the thing, I'm really, I think also I struggle with. I think I get the idea of starting a business, leasing a business, and going, wow, it's growing, but I don't have enough capital or faith in this business that I can put on an addition, especially with construction costs. So I would be willing to say, with proper screening, with cladding them in a nice way, if they wanted to keep them for 6 months, a year, until that is viable. Certainly, Discount Tires should have built an additional building by now for all those tires and not have 6 old beat up shipping containers. I don't want to see that. I don't know if this allows for that. I would imagine with the screening requirements, it doesn't. So I think those are my comments. I have no problem getting canoes or anything else in, like Councilor Davis, or using it for an open permit, but I don't like it as a part of a regular business. And I think that we should limit the time that they're allowed to be on site. Because at some point the business just needs to, like you mentioned, Councilor Kopp, just make the capital investment in the property, or find a different property, or take other forms than having rusty old shipping containers all over our community. With that, we'll go back to you and then Steve Davis.
Okay, and I think that's perfect, Jonathan. That's the kind of solution that I'm looking for. If we're going to allow these permanently, they shouldn't be able just to be put on the site and left as they are, as those metal shipping containers. So, a permanent screening that would match the building design, or match something, kind of similar to our planning requirements for the look of a building, I think would be appropriate. Or, short of building another building to house those in. I can see, I guess those shipping containers are easy because they can just put them on the back of a semi and haul them off. But I don't think they're intended to sit on a site permanently. So I could live with something like that. Maybe we can direct staff, if it's the will of council, to come back with wording that would work for that.
Thank you, Shelley. Steve.
Briefly, you grabbed some of my clarification that they are 320 square feet, so you can only have 3 of them on a site at a time. But I would challenge, Jonathan, your Google search. There are actually 2 sizes of containers. One is 8'6", the other is 9'6". So, you'd hate to order one out to your site and then they show up with a 9'6", and you go, oh, well, you'll have to take that one back because we're limited to 9 feet. So to me, 10 feet is like, that's fine. Doesn't really matter. But I agree with Shelley, and you. It probably shouldn't be a permanent part of your business. Put a roof on it and put siding on it and call it an addition if you want to. And I also, again, I think there should be some temporary, point of time, 30 days or 60 days where you could set one down and do whatever you want to with it without screening it. That's me.
Any other comments? Any motions? Go ahead, Shelley.
Let me get my agenda open. I would move that we approve the planning file 66-20 with various text amendments to municipal code 070, excluding the text amendment for the portable storage units, and direct staff to come back with adjustments to that code that put on a temporary time that they can be on site, or either if they're going to be permanent, that they be screened appropriately or somehow incorporated into a building. Is that specific enough? Or
It's specific enough that I'll second it.
Okay.
Further comments on the motion? Go ahead, Charlie. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, I guess, Charlie, my only concern with what you're saying is, and maybe Carl could answer this question, is if we take it out entirely, we still don't have any regulations. Or if we put it in, we can always come back, either amend it to get the things you want, or we can amend it on second reading. I hate taking it out altogether because it could allow some people to try to get vested rights between now and when it's approved. So that's my thought.
Just a point of clarification, does this apply to existing containers on existing properties if we pass it?
It would depend on whether they, and Gretchen can always give you the definition better than I can. If they are simply non-conforming, they're going to be non-conforming. If there are containers that would meet the definition, I think at this point, then they would be permitted.
well, I think that's my concern, is that right now it's not in the code. So if we add it to the code and we allow them to be permitted, does that grandfather everything in that's out there right now?
I actually think that's really mostly up to you to decide, and to decide what the timeline is to come into compliance. Which is something, honestly, that is something that we can try to address on second reading in terms of perhaps some additional proposed language in the ordinance itself to address current nonconformities and a time period to come into compliance.
Okay, would it be, so do you have a recommendation, Carl? Do we just exclude it right now, or should we keep it in there?
I would keep it in there for now, just because it gives us something to work off of, honestly. So.
Okay, can I add a stipulation that this in no way grants approval to existing?
Yeah, I think that's fair. The other thing is that I'd actually, you may want to modify your motion to be approval of the planning item in the ordinance itself.
Okay.
Which is, sorry, I don't have it.
Ordinance number 2021-3.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we can include that.
I will amend my second. Further comments on the motion?
What are we voting on? I'm sorry, I don't understand the amended motion.
I think we ended up that we're going ahead and approving, per Carl's recommendation, we're going ahead and approving the changes to the municipal code 070 as presented by staff in the ordinance 2021-3. But we are in no way granting approval to the portable storage units. And we were going to address that prior to second reading on how we will address the changes to that section of these codes.
That would include the stuff you suggested and that Steve suggested in second reading, right?
Exactly.
Yes, we still are requesting that staff come back. I'm keeping that in my motion, that staff bring back revisions prior to second reading that address our concerns for the screening and permanency of these units. Does that make sense, or do I need to start over again?
I think I understood what you were saying, Shelley.
Okay.
Makes sense to me as well. Counselor Davis, question or comment?
Well, just the comment that, and I don't think it was clear, but on second reading, should be something in there too about the temporary use.
Right, exactly. I was saying all of those, we were going to try to address I took it as all of the council comments we'll try to address on second reading.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more hands, Ryan, let's call the question.
Okay. Mayor Godis,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Hershey,
Yes.
Counselor Cow,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Stepp,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right, I'm knocking them out tonight. Guys, it's 8:15. I hate to do this because I know we have guests, but I think we could all probably, let me just speak for myself, I could use a 9-minute break and reconvene at 8:25. Does anybody else need a break? Okay. All right, with that, we'll reconvene at 8:25. Apologies, Bryce, Amy, and whomever else are there will be with you shortly.
Ryan. Ryan mute.
What's going on, Tony?
Did you like me quoting in French?
Yes, that was funny.
Je
I
parle
did
français
like you.
un petit peu, oui. Tu
And
parles
luckily,
français, oui.
I took French in high school.
Je suis aussi, moi aussi.
Yeah, that's about all I learned. I did take French in high school.
I took French in high school for 4 years.
Yeah, I took 4 years of French in a semester, so I could pass. I was the one subject I was behind, and I was fine on grades and everything else. But to get into CSU, I needed to pass language, so I got tutored for 1 semester hardcore in French for 4 years, and somehow I passed the test. French. No, it wasn't 4 years. It was French 3. It was 3 years worth.
Well, I wanted to make sure I took French in high school to avoid having to take it at CU Boulder. So if I had 3, I think it was the requirement was 3, but I had 4, then I didn't have to take any language at college.
Yeah, I took 4 years, no, 2 years of Spanish at CU.
CSU.
No, I went to CSU when I was younger. I never graduated, but I ended up going to CMC and then CU when Kristen went to law school there. I went to undergrad.
Oh,
Got my degree.
I lived at Kittredge, which was next to the law school.
Yeah, it's a beautiful law school.
It is. It's a really nice law school.
All right.
As Charlie Wellman's there. Are you ready, Jonathan? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
We were talking about college and French.
And apparently Spanish and CMU and CSU and all right, we're back on Shelley, Paula.
Before we start, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to wish Paula, Shelley, and Ingrid, and Deborah and everyone else a happy Mother's Day Sunday.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And not you, Jonathan.
No, I would like to also wish my wife a happy 20th anniversary this weekend.
Happy anniversary, Jonathan.
Yeah, happy anniversary. That's a big one.
It's all downhill from here, right? I mean, it's all easy sailing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Bad's gonna never happen. No hiccups.
As far as you got is a miracle. Oh, I'm sorry. Is my mic on? It's off, right? Good. All right.
All right. I don't see Deborah yet, but I see enough of the people that we can probably go on to item number 15. We're back in session. I guess I'll open it up. There's some discussion on why this is on our agenda. And from my recollection, there was a conversation between someone who wanted to do an open records request and had questions about the process, how we did things. And based on that conversation, City Attorney Carl Hanlon brought it back to us, said during his city attorney comments in March, hey, there's been some questions about this. We'd like to come back and have you guys re-examine what we do. Let's wait till we get after the election, first meeting of May. Well, now it's the first meeting of May. And I said, this would be great. And one of the things I would like to see is how do we compare to other municipalities? Are we in line? Are we out of line? Are we doing things that are kind of a standardization? So I believe Steve Boyd, our COO, has some information to present to us and maybe some recommendations. I know there's media here as well. I'd also like to hear from them during public comment about some of the things that they like or don't like or would like to see different or works for them, because this is, at the end of the day, it's a partnership to get this information out, and we want to be as transparent as possible. So Steve Boyd, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Ryan and I are generally responsible for handling core requests as they come in. We have
I can't hear Steve, Mr. Mayor. I can't hear him.
Steve, your audio cut out.
Can he speak up or closer to the mic too?
Yeah, can you guys see me now?
I can hear you, but you're soft.
Okay.
Can you speak up?
Okay.
Speak
I'll try
up.
again, whatever.
Enunciate.
It's clearly a technical issue.
Yeah, I'm sometimes technically challenged, but can you guys hear me well enough for me to keep going? Okay. So yeah, Ryan and I generally are in charge of core requests. We get a fair number here at the city. We have tried to make our process as simple and easy and quick as possible for people. We did include a lot of other cities and municipalities and counties and other areas kind of in our general neck of the woods. We included their policies and their fees and kind of what they do. We also included the language from the Attorney General, so you guys had that available to you in the packet. And I think you'll find that our policy and our fees and our response time, all that stuff is really pretty much in the fairway with everybody else's. We always try to respond within 72 hours of getting a request of some kind. Once in a while, it'll be kind of complicated, so we'll need to ask for some additional time. But normally we can get it done in that 3-day period. We do charge a fairly nominal fee if it's something that's going to require a lot of staff time. You know, like if we get a request that has a lot of emails that we have to kind of go through individually or something like that. That again is fairly rare. For the most part, we can get things handled without a fee and within that 72 hours. Our form is one page, and then there's a second kind of half page to it that outlines the fees and that kind of stuff. It's online. It's a fillable PDF, so people can jump on and get it done that way. We do ask people as a favor to us to complete that form so that we know exactly what information they're asking for and what exactly we can provide for them. So in the 4 years that I've been here, I'm not really aware of any problems. We've, filled a number of requests, but I'm happy to hear what anybody has in terms of questions or suggestions in terms of how we can make it better. But we do take it pretty seriously. We do want to be transparent, and when those requests come in, we will put them at the top of the list of priorities.
Thanks, Steve. And it looks like there's a recommendation that you have for maintaining a log. Can you talk a little bit about that log and what that would look like?
Yeah, so there are some entities out there that will, we do maintain a log. I mean, every time something comes in, we have a process and we capture it in our process. What we don't do is post that log online as a matter of, just kind of open public record. It's all public information, and we don't mind doing that. So, if you guys would like, we could start to post a record of who asked for it, what it was, when they asked for it, and when we filled that request, and just keep a running list of those things up online that somebody could go and download.
Is there any other questions for Steve from council? Or Carl? Go ahead, Charlie.
Steve, as I understand this log, this is something the feds do in theirs. They do it automatically. They have
So
it
did you say
publicly
the feds?
posted. The federal government, yeah, sorry.
I think the
I should
federal
know more.
government, yeah, I think the federal government does do that. It's not a requirement as far as I know, but it wouldn't be very difficult for us, and we're happy to do it if you guys would like us to.
Any other questions? Yeah, I'm looking at this. Is this a sample report, Steve? This log that you provided under our packet? It's just a sample.
Yeah, right.
Thanks. That's helpful. Go ahead, Tony. You're muted, Tony.
Steve, I yelled at you for not speaking up, and then I muted myself. My understanding, and I'm not an expert at Cora, but I certainly have dealt with it from both ends, including with this city government, is that while you have that form, I can send a letter to any state government agency and, it has my name, what I want. I can cite the Open Record Act 2472-201, and that's sufficient. If I were to write such a letter without filling out that form, you of course would respond, correct?
Yeah, we would.
So would an email be okay, a letter, a phone call? I mean, because I can file that PDF via email, right? The one to fill
Absolutely. Yeah, you file the PDF and we'll get it, online in an email. We always ask, like I say, just as a favor, would you please submit our request form? I've had one instance where somebody said, look, I'm sorry, but I emailed you all the information that you need to fill this. So I said, okay, and we went ahead and filled it because we did have all the information, but we do like
Well, you
to have
say
it.
a favor, but we're not in the favor business. This is Colorado Open Records Act, and it's the
Right.
state law.
Right.
So as we'd certainly like you to fill out that form, but what I'm saying is if someone were to write on the back of a napkin from Juicy Lucy's, I want this, and cited the statute, I think you would respond, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
A part of your question, Councilman Hershey, was a phone call. I don't think we would consider a phone call sufficient.
Well,
It's got to be
I
written.
I said phone call and I misspoke. I'm sorry. Thank you for pointing that out, Kath. Deborah. I didn't mean a phone call, but you could call and ask some questions, right, Deborah? Let's say, I don't really understand Cora. I'd like to request something. You would direct me to your website in that PDF, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I would love to turn it over to the public to hear their thoughts on this. Anybody from the public? Mr. Jacobson.
Hello, how are you guys doing? Thank you so much for having us on here. So the first two issues I have, first of all, well, I want to come back to the second one. I mean, that log is a terrible idea. I think that's a bad policy. I don't know of any municipalities that do it. And so I'd love to know who those are and really dig into that. This council meeting with me only having 3 minutes and not being able to have conversation back and forth isn't very conducive to discuss the policy. But my first one is the core request policy has changed in recent months, and I believe it's because of a personnel change. The new custodian, there's a new custodian in place, and so they are becoming more and more stringent about just regular conversation, regular, easily accessible documents, and that's really important. I want council to understand is these documents that are public information are first and foremost the public's. The public is the city, and so they have paid money, and for whatever purposes those are, they are the public's, and therefore, I have a challenge with charging anybody any money to get public information, but that's I've lost that battle, and we now have core requests. To go back to the issue of the log in this case that was just mentioned. I mean, the notification of somebody that is impacted by a core request or putting this information online to be accessible is not a good idea. There are many reasons why that I would love to discuss. I won't have time to do that today in a minute, but let me give you just a couple of examples.
Bryce, just to interrupt real quick, you can take a couple extra minutes. I'm not gonna nail you to the wall on it. So if you need to take a little bit for context, please feel free.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So one example would be in the case of a public contract. So if somebody was to want to bid on a job that was already bid with the city in previous years, they come back in, they do a core request for information about that bid. That the custodian is required by Cora to not allow any trade secrets to be shared. But just that alone, having the existing contractor who's had that contract for years, knowing that ABC Construction is going to bid for that, gives them an unfair advantage, specifically in the case of a closed envelope bid process. In the event of a police officer having a domestic altercation that didn't necessarily impact their work, but that particular person who feels as though they're a victim, core requesting something with regards to the police department policy, requesting something with regards to the individual themselves, can pose challenges for that particular requester. And I list these examples because I want to make sure that you understand that while I'm in the news business, my biggest concern is the general public who's not necessarily a professional in this and doesn't work with this day in and day out, and doesn't know the core laws as well as I hope the professionals in the news media. And then lastly, I want to leave with this. I mean, I think it is I want to state this, and I had a PowerPoint, and I won't share that. I don't think I can. But I want to leave the council with this. The fact that you have a core request policy that says you will notify the impacted party is just counterintuitive to the core request policy, because the core request policy, to release information, you must fill out a form. But if you put in a core request, you're automatically going to notify the impacted party, or that party. In the case of the log, that information is just automatically available on the website. It's the opposite of what a core request policy is. So let me say that again. To have a core request policy that states, or that in action notifies the impacted party of the core request without a core request, doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that's something that the council should definitely consider and prevent from happening. I hope that all makes sense. If you have questions, of course, I'd be more than happy to answer if that's allowable.
I think I do. Yeah, we can go back and forth a little bit. This isn't a work session. We don't usually respond to public comment, but I think for what we're trying to accomplish, I want clarity, I think is what I'm searching for here. So, Mr. Jacobson, when you say I guess what is you listed several examples of where it could be problematic if we let somebody know. I didn't quite get in the bidding process and the contractor. Can you explain that a little bit more of how that would be problematic to awarding bids?
Yeah. So as you know, in the private sector, which many of you are in, if you are in the business of whatever it might be, you are very aware of your competitors, and you probably know information about how they operate, what they bid things at, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the event of the city of Glenwood Springs, if you have a contract that's been a job that you bid out for several years, and then a new bidder wants to bid on that against the existing contractor, just that alone, if that other contractor, the existing contractor, is notified that ABC company has requested information about the previous bid, that unto itself makes that an unfair advantage, especially if it's a closed envelope bidding process.
Steve Boyd, do we have any examples? Sorry to belabor this, but do we have examples of that where we have a continual contract? Because at least in my mind, if somebody is made aware of that and they have a standing contract with the city, doesn't that just engender a better potential bidding process, which would get us lower prices, which would be a benefit to the taxpayer?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have experience specifically with somebody looking for an existing contract in the bidding process. If we got that request, we would try to comply with it, with anything that really is public record in there. But I just haven't, I don't think I've been through that before where somebody was seeking that information. So I can't really speak to that specifically.
Snow removal, Steve, does that help?
Yeah, I don't specifically recall that one. I think that, go ahead, Carl.
Middle screen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in the case of contractors, the contract itself would have been approved publicly. So the contract probably isn't a council packet, more than likely, and the unit values. I have seen contractors on a bid challenge where they don't believe, or they believe something was amiss in the bid a few years, well, mid 2000s, we had a large a bid challenge that we had to respond to a bunch of documents that a contractor felt like their bid should have been the winning bid, and went through a process not only for the contractor's information, but then for like staff emails and things like that. But I haven't run into that particular situation, since we have to publicly announce, you know, those documents are out there. They probably wouldn't even have to make a core request to get it, because it's probably online.
Well, yes, but they do core request to get it before the bidding process for the contract previous, not the current contract bidding process.
Right. No, what I was saying is that the prior contract would have been approved publicly.
Right, but they still put in a core request to get that, because they don't have access. They can't. I mean, much of the stuff that's requested doesn't get accessed online, even if it is.
I was actually just thinking about this specific instance where, if we're bidding a contract, those contracts are generally approved on the consent or the regular agenda. They're approved on the consent if they're within budget. They're approved on the regular agenda, and so the contract and pricing information likely would have been included in a public packet that is still online. But
yes, if I could, just one more thing, I'm sorry. It's the notification, if somebody doesn't find it online and does a core request, that company, impacted party that's impacted, then gets notified that a company did a core request.
Yeah, and I think the notification deals more with personnel kinds of issues. You know, if somebody is a First Amendment auditor and, they say, I want to see all the, records of performance for a particular police officer or something, we would let that officer know that somebody was looking for that.
Okay. I add that I think that it's pretty consistent throughout the different jurisdictions, because when I got on council, and I'm loving that I'm putting this on the record, but I made the request that my home address not be made public. And I was notified by the assessor's office through Garfield County that in the event that someone requested it, that they would notify me that there had been a request. So while I do see some rationale in some of these examples, I think that there's some existing standards that I think must work. And I'd like to think in this application it does as well. That's just my 2 cents.
I'd love to hear from Amy Marsh, if you're still around. Amy, go ahead.
Okay, I am still around. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everybody else. I'd like to make just some general remarks, and then I have some questions. I'm hoping that my remarks aren't irrelevant, but there are already hindrances to access to public records. And I know this might not be an issue of access, but I still want to say this. If Glenwood Springs wants to make even more records off limits, I would urge council not to do that. I also question what constitutes a, quote, injury to public interest. I mean, as a journalist, and if I'm filing a public records request, I and my news team and others in my field with whom I consult have determined that this is of interest to the public. And it could be seen that if someone within the government is deeming it not of interest to the public, like maybe Steve Boyd is, and no offense, Mr. Boyd, but if, he's the one back there determining, or the custodian is determining, well, is this interest to the public? Should I let this out or not let this out? I think that can be a real hindrance to fair and accurate reporting. I agree with Bryce that there shouldn't be fees, but can't do anything about that. And that the general public relies on the news people, journalists, to get that information. I mean, as for informing the person about whom the records are requested, where are the provisions in Cora that allow for that? To me, it seems like a dangerous precedent, opening the requester for retaliation. Is the point of putting logs online to notify the subject of the request? If so, I mean, I'm not in favor of that. I mean, what's the relevance of doing that? And so, Mr. Mayor, you had mentioned, I'm trying to find my notes here. You had mentioned that, and if I remember correctly here, that making the logs public would make a bidding process, for example, more competitive.
I
think
asked,
that's what you said.
I asked the question. I didn't state that.
Okay. I would say, well, why would it make the bidding process more competitive? And I'm not a business person, but I don't know that everybody thinks that way. And maybe I'm a little paranoid, but I think it opens people up to retaliation, and it's worth consideration. Thank you.
Thanks. And Amy, I'm a little confused because you said at the beginning, I think some of this stuff is none of us want to make more records off limits at all. I think that's not at all what we're trying to do. I think you're making a general statement, but I think also that, but then the last comment you had was, but you should make this less transparent. And I think this is what we're talking about, at least from my perspective, is how do we make this as transparent as possible for the public? And I'm going to shut up because you're going to write this down and you're going to probably make me trip up my words. So I'm going to let Carl now talk, who's the attorney.
What I wanted to assure Amy is that in all the years that I've worked with the city of Glenwood Springs, it has never denied a request for being not in the public interest to release. I honestly don't know exactly what that means. And I haven't run across it yet in my practice. Maybe, specialized security arrangements or something if we had a presidential visit or something like that, until after that had occurred, or maybe some parts of that, right? That doesn't fall into a clean category in Cora. It's a very, like I said, it's something I have never really run into seeing it being used. I think the idea of the log, I think the purpose of that was concern that the press didn't feel like, because I don't think, Steve, we've gotten a complaint from the public on responding to requests, but it's a way to be accountable, to show that a request came in, that it was dealt with timely, and that it was answered. To try to, I think, reduce, and I think that's why federal agencies do it. You see it a lot with FOIA, because that is, you can wait 18 months to get a completed open records request.
Right.
And so I think it's a way federal agencies use to try to show the accountability to being responsive. And if you look at that log, there are some instances where they don't show who made the request. And I think that would be a great example of what the publisher of the PI mentioned about, do you have somebody who is at risk? And so you wouldn't necessarily put that up at risk for retaliation if they were requesting some piece of information. And that's kind of what I see in that log. And really, we only put it in, that was something that I've encountered with federal agencies, and just thought that I suggested to Steve that it be included in the packet.
Okay. Am I still unmuted? I am.
You are.
Yeah.
Could I, and Carl, so in responding to that last, the at-risk person on the log, so would Mr. Boyd, who's in charge of the logs, and public records for the city, would he pick and choose who would be on the log, or would he be redacting information
Yeah, I
on
think
the log?
that's where I don't know, right? Like it's an area we don't have in the policy, and so it was why we were having this discussion and wanted to hear from you guys. I mean, I would imagine that there would be a question on the form that just asks, you know, that maybe asks the question.
Ask what question?
The question of whether or not, you know, you want it to be publicly logged or not. I don't know. I'm not even suggesting. It was a way of trying to address this accountability issue that seemed to be coming up, that we were somehow not being responsive. And so we were just looking for a way to make it easy for people to see if we were.
Well, I don't know. I'm not on the council, so here I don't know if it's appropriate for me to continue talking.
Well, yeah.
Could I?
Well, I think we're kind of getting into a work session type environment. So,
got it.
And I appreciate the comments. I mean, I appreciate the conversation, but we have some counselors that have their hands up, and I'd like to get to them. So Tony, and then Charlie, and then if we need to come back to Amy or Bryce for additional clarification, you know, just stay tuned. So go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I agree with Bryce, and I guess I agree with Amy too, that I don't think there should be cost, but I'm not in the state legislature. CORE has been around, I think Carl will correct me, since the late 60s, and there are fees for copying and there are fees for time beyond, I think, the first hour of research and the time to copy. I've made several CORE requests, and I've done a lot of CORE requests for my office from the district attorney's office, and I've never had us charge, but you can charge. I mean, if this is something that you guys want to take up to the legislature, I just want our policy to be consistent. I am a big fan of CORE. I have used it with this council even after I was a councilman, but where I think I really agree, I think where Bryce, I have an issue is, why would I like to get emails of fellow councilmen have to file a CORE request, or to get the numbers on 7th Street? Can I just say to the city, can I have this? And I think in some cases you can. I look at our role, Charlie and Shelley and Paula and Ingrid and Jonathan and Steve, as sort of, we are the custodian. We work for the people. We are the people's representative with the city. We don't work for the city. So we should have that sort of access to information. But I mean, one problem I have, since we're talking about it, is that I have to file CORE requests sometimes to get information. Then just really quickly to Bryce and to Amy's point about, well, you're alerting the subject. Well, you know, I mean, I guess I could wake up every morning and say, and write Steve Boyd a little request and say, I would like to CORE request, has the Post Independent requested any information on it? And he would have to give that. I mean, I'm for full transparency, but full transparency means full transparency. I mean, with the exceptions of HR records and certain things that are clearly accepted, and criminal justice records, which have their own specific act, which would apply to our police force, I think the more transparent we are, like Jonathan says, the better. I know we're getting sort of into a work session here, Jonathan, and I don't know what Charlie's thoughts are, your thoughts as the mayor are on maybe having a future discussion about this, or maybe a work session about this with the newspaper, so that we can be more clear and more transparent, because these acts and these laws are in place for a very good purpose. And they have been utilized by a lot of people, by newspapers, by private citizens, by whistleblowers, and they have found corruption, and not in our city, I hope, but in other things, and they are very beneficial. And I'm a big supporter of them. I'm also a supporter of Bryce. If you want to go down to the legislature, and I'll go with you, and we can talk to our representatives about making it even broader and less hard to do. I'm for that too. But I appreciate you guys coming. Without the First Amendment, without the Fourth Estate, our democracy, our government doesn't work without this. It does not work without that. And people can criticize and scream fake news and everything. That's nonsense. Without the free press, we don't have a free country. That's why it's the First Amendment. So I really appreciate what you guys do. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Charlie.
A couple of questions. One of these is, I guess, going back to this competitive bid thing. Steve, if we put Southbridge up for bid, and I'm gonna come in as a contractor and bid, do I know the other contractors that are bidding? Is there a list of people who have taken out bid documents? Is that available to the public?
Yeah, we'll often have, a pre-bid walkthrough or a pre-bid meeting. So people will show up to that and sign up for that. And there are sometimes subcontractors that want to get a list of the contractors that have come to it so they can price some stuff for them. So yeah, that's generally available.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And I guess my question is a little bit different. Charlie Wilman Construction is going to come in and I want to see whether the other ABC and the Hanlon Construction have also bid, so I know how I'm competing against. Can I find that out? So I kind of can shape my bid. I might want to, I guess what I'm trying to find out.
No, we'll have a pre-bid meeting and then the bids will be due. And then once the bids are due, we will disclose, who bid. But at that point, the bid's already been submitted. Does that make sense?
But I can't find out who else is bidding on a particular project, other than a pre-bid sign-up sheet.
Right. I mean, we don't necessarily know who's going to bid, but if they come to a pre-bid meeting, then we assume they're likely to.
Okay. And a lot of pre-bid, if I remember, a lot of pre-bid meetings are mandatory if you're going to bid, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah. And then, Carl, I guess question for you, is a core request a public record?
It is, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what Tony was alluding to, is that,
And I appreciate Amy Marsh's concern about potential misuse of, I can't remember the private interest or the words she used. I know I read it when I was looking at all the material, but as I recall the statute, if we turn down something and we lose, we pay their attorney's fees and cost and everything else. So it's not in our interest to turn down something unless there's a real good reason for it, because it costs us a lot of money. If there's some judge who says, no, that's open, isn't that right?
That's right. And like I said, we try really hard, to answer every request. And that may be a simple one-page, whatever document is being requested. It can also be, which it has been over the last couple of years, we've had a couple of requests for emails that ranged into the range of 700,000 emails that we had to review and sift. So that, we're under the same obligations to treat that request exactly the same as the one pager, and we do.
Like RMI, Carl made a request like that?
Yeah, RMI made a couple of requests like that. And that's one of those where, certainly we spent far more time than we could ever bill for. And there's a statutory rate set for what you can bill for that time. And so you just deal with, it is what it is, I guess is what I'm saying. And we try to be very responsive to those.
Well, I think, to the question of charging, a tactic that RMI and Garfield and Heck, their attorneys here, have employed is to bury us with core requests that are relevant, not relevant, and that just will spend all of our staff's time and grind the gears of our ability to fight them back with using core as a tool and a bludgeon. So the only thing that we have as a way to not have what do they call that when slap suits, to avoid that kind of misuse of the law is, there is a nominal fee, and maybe we will charge that. And when we do, then that avoids somebody saying, I want every single email that Jonathan Godes ever sent to anybody, personal, private, or anything. And that kind of narrowing it down and making people fill out a form saying, here's exactly what I want. And it can't be so broad that I might not have come out a check. Now, to that point, Steve Boyd, if a citizen files a query request and asks for something incredibly broad, and you're looking at like, man, this is going to be like 2 days of my staff's time, it might cost $2,000. Do you come back with an estimate to that person before you fill out something like that? Or how do we deal with something like that?
Yeah, we would always let somebody know that we think it's going to take this amount of time or whatever to respond to your request. I would try to narrow it down a little bit and see if I could really understand what it was that they were really looking for so that we could avoid that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if it's appropriate because I think Tony made a good point. Is this should we have a work session on this? I'm not sure from my hearing that there's a problem with the system. but maybe there is. And if there's some way we could meet in a work session and try to find some resolution that would make newspaper and or radio people feel like if they make a request that they're getting a proper response and things like that, I'm happy to sit down in a public work session and talk about that. I don't know if that's a place in this meeting or not.
Well, I don't think, and I'll defer back to the press on this, but I don't feel that maybe I'm misinterpreting that they're making the assertion that they're not getting the information. I think that one of the assertions is letting people know the process. I think is their concern, or at least Mr. Jacobson's concern, not necessarily that they're not getting the right information. Is that correct, or am I? Go ahead, Bryce. Let me allow you to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, that is correct. I just want to make sure that we get the information that we need all the time. The challenge that we had in that regard was just that there has been a change, and it's becoming more difficult, and we have to fill out more core requests. But again, Carl mentioned this in our conversation. It's not that arduous, and I wish it would be easier for me and for everybody and for our staff. But yeah, we're getting the information. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if I can address a couple other things real fast.
I tell you what, I kind of feel that, we still have a few other agenda items, and I think that this is a worthwhile conversation. I was hoping to be able to get some resolution and give staff direction, but I'm willing to have a 45-minute work session about this in the future in a more informal give and take. I think that'd be more productive, and so I guess I want to apologize that I couldn't foresee that it developed.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, I'm apologizing to council as well, because it was, this is like a 20-minute agenda item that I thought would take about 5 minutes. So I guess I would be supportive of having a 45-minute work session. I know our work sessions get really busy, so it might not be in the next 2 or 3, just to set expectations, and we're not trying to, put you off or anything, but it might fall in at some point this summer to have a short work session, I think, where we can probably have a back and forth in a little more informal way. Go ahead, Charlie.
Actually, my view would be is if we're going to come back into city council chambers in the meeting in July, I would like to sit down across the table and have this discussion rather than, I know I can't see Bryce and I can't see Amy, and I'd like to be able to look at them and talk. I'm truly trying to understand the issues and make sure that we'll be as transparent as we possibly can. So.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Right. I feel the same way as Charlie. I'd rather just make sure it'd be nice to have a face-to-face conversation and just make sure we get to the bottom of all the questions and the issues, because we do want to make sure we're getting all the information out there and that we're as transparent and open as we can be. So I appreciate the conversation here tonight, but I'm happy to have a work session on it.
So it sounds like we have a desire to have a work session when we're back in person. We're looking at being back in person the first meeting of July. I can't guarantee it'll be at that first meeting, because I think we'll be really excited to have a lot of other people who've been queued up that need to have in-person meetings, and it is a matter of timeliness. So I think I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody when I say that thank you for bringing this to our attention. It's obviously a longer conversation than we have time for at 9 o'clock tonight, with some other agenda items we need to address. So I guess I will say I will try really hard by the end of the summer to have a work session with any other with you, Mr. Jacobson, or Ms. Marsh about this. And if any other members of the press would like to come in and have this conversation with us, I think that'd be fair.
Thank you, Bryce.
Is that okay with the rest of council? Is that good enough?
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Bryce.
Bryce, Amy, is that agreeable?
Absolutely.
Great. All right. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Let's move on to the next agenda item. Let's see. Shipping containers, open records.
Housing Commission.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about shipping containers again?
No. Housing Commission.
You want one on your lawn, Tony?
I do. I could source that.
You have to clear out the red soil.
Are you going to bring me one for Mother's Day?
Housing Commission appointments. Who's the liaison for Housing Commission?
Paula and I both kind of are liaisons there.
Okay.
We do have an appointment. Actually, we have, I believe, 3 appointments. I don't know if Hannah speaks to this or no, I'll just do it. Let's see. So we have 2 members of the Housing Commission that have reapplied for appointment, and they it is Sumner Schachter and Sean Nesbitt, and they've both applied for a second term, so they're both eligible. I'd love to see them reappointed to the Housing Commission. And then I interviewed Bobby Hodge, and she's applied and is also eligible. So I would recommend appointing Bobby to the Housing Commission as well. And all of those terms will expire in 2024.
I would second that.
So do you need a motion? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that was a motion. I felt like that was a motion. So I'll second that. Any further conversation? Okay.
I actually work with Bobby Hodge, and I think she's a lovely addition to the Housing Commission. So thank you so much, Shelley, for interviewing her.
Great, thanks, Ingrid.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Next item is number 17, Council Commissions Board Liaison Appointments. I want to apologize. I should have gotten this out earlier this week, but it's actually pretty straightforward. So I will just kind of go down the list really quickly. And if people are, yes, Charlie, go ahead.
I just noticed in what's in the packet that on FAB it's backwards. I'm the rep and Paul is the alternate. Other than that, and I don't know if that makes any difference, but it's inaccurate the way it's in here.
Okay. So I'll just kind of go through quickly. Ryan will probably have to rewatch this section to get it all down, but DDA, the current chairs are Steve and Charlie. So when I read these, I'll let you know if there's anybody that has been asked to or is not, if it's a change of condition, because about 95% is not, it's same boards and commissions. There's just a few changes. Financial advisory is still Charlie and Paula. However, it currently is with liaisons and alternates, or I'm sorry, leads and alternates. Tourism, Paula and Ingrid are stepping off of that, and Charlie's going to be the tourism representative. Vale Board is Councilor Hershey maintaining that position. The Volunteer Firefighter Pension Board is still myself. Parks and Rec, still Steve Davis. Airport is still myself. Historic Preservation and Rural Fire Protection District are still both Tony. Arts and Culture, that is Shelley, and is there anybody else on that, or is it just Shelley?
We have not had an alternate liaison on that, but so I would welcome if anyone would like to serve in that role.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to serve in that role if it's okay with Shelley.
That'd be great, Tony.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony.
No, thank you. I'm very arty. Something. No, I'm kidding. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Housing is currently Shelley and Paula. We're maintaining that. River is Shelley is. Ooh, I'm getting some feedback. Steve Davis, go ahead. You have a question. Just jump in.
No, you get to the end of your
list. Okay.
Point, and then I have something to say about it.
Okay. All right, I'm sure. River, Shelley is stepping down off that and being replaced by Paula. Steve Davis is still the alternate on that. Transportation, Shelley's maintaining her alternate position. The liaison, Charlie, is stepping off of that, being replaced by Ingrid. Garfield Clean Energy is still Ingrid and Shelley. The chamber representative is Ingrid. Rudai Water and Power is Ingrid. CDOT Intermountain Transportation.
No, Jonathan, I'm a chamber.
You're the chamber.
Yeah, Charlie
Yes.
Rick to be chamber when Rick left. And I don't want to say you approved it, because then when I say you approved it, and now you're surprised, I'm like, but you did.
Oh. I don't want to say you're losing your marbles, but yeah. Okay.
Can you share that?
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Yes, I can. I can share all of this. Rudai Water Powered, Ingrid. CDOT Intermountain is Charlie. CML, Charlie. Cast, myself. Club 20, Paula. Rafta, Jonathan, and Shelley. What am I missing? And again, I really apologize. I didn't get this out sooner. It's on the agenda, and that was my fault. So, Steve, what did I miss?
The only challenge I have is that I think probably for 6 years I've been Park and Rec, and I think that that's a really important board, and we have great meetings there. But I have no alternate, and I would really sometimes, an alternate is needed, and I just don't know who to call on. So I guess I start calling on everybody, but it'd be great if somebody had some interest there and would step up to that.
So let me jump into that. I only have 3. So let me jump in and I'll be your alternate. Okay, Steve?
Oh, great. Can you attend all the future meetings then? And I'll show up again.
Yeah. Sure, totally. Let me take that over. And honestly, if you want to switch roles and flip flop, and I can be the appointed and you be the alternate, I'm comfortable with that as well. It allows me to play a little catch up and just being more present in meetings, and then you already kind of know the seat.
Yeah, no, I think I would welcome that. I think that would be great if you wouldn't mind doing that. I think it's a really important board. We talk about a lot of really important things there, and greatly impact the city in many ways. Yesterday there was a meeting and we were deciding what color the basketball court should be painted. So it's good stuff.
What color did you decide, Steve?
I don't know. It was green, browns, blues. I don't know how. There were options. We chose option D.
Well, and I would say for all alternates, and the reason, Tony, I didn't mention you with airport is not a slight, but I think if we have people who are alternates, at least my expectation would be that it's not an alternate name only, because it is really difficult as an alternate who never comes to something to then just jump in and try to interact with a group of people. You spend the first 20 minutes just doing introductions and trying to catch up on things. So I think if for anybody who's volunteering as an alternate, I would recommend or encourage you to attend as many meetings as humanly possible so that you can be ready to take over should the regular member not be there. If you're just being there just in case of then I think that's not a super high value to the commission or council.
But I have one concern, so we've got Charlie in alternate to DDA, chamber, and he's tourism. That's all very downtown centric, and I'm just concerned that I love you, Charlie. That's not what I'm worried about, but I'm worried about more about, are we getting enough representation from other council members to be aware of kind of downtown issues? And from what you were
I picked up tourism just because I understood there wasn't anyone that had expressed an interest. I thought it was important that somebody be there. So
no, I absolutely agree with you. I just thought that if I need to go back to tourism, I'm glad to do that, to have more variety of council representation. This is just more of a general question of, is the council getting different perspectives are these boards getting different perspectives from other council people? So that's my thought on that, and I'm okay with it, Charlie. I just want to put it out there and say, this is what we're looking at. But Steve is
I'm okay.
DDA, right? Steve, you're DDA and Charlie's an alternate. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And if you're saying that you don't want me on the DDA, then
No, I want you on the DDA. I want you all on that. It was just a general comment on, having representation that, people are hearing from different sides of the area. Tourism board in particular, I was on it. And I would always bring up, well, what about those people out on 6th Street, or what about over on Highway 6 and 24? Understanding the tourism is not just a downtown thing. So that's all I'm saying, is that we were representative of the whole community and when we're on these boards.
Well, Charlie, if it's not a not a big deal to you, if Paul's willing to maintain that, is that okay with second tourism?
I didn't hear what you just said, Jonathan.
Yeah, if it's not a big deal, do you mind if Paula stays on tourism then?
Or I could be your alternate, Charlie, if you want to take it, and then I'll just be your alternate and have that other voice.
Either way, or you could be it and I can be alternate. I don't get it. I mainly was filling in because there was a discussion that people want to move on to different things, which I fully understand. And I think it's an important board. So
yeah, and I'm bringing something up and backpedaling. But it's more just to say we got, just to kind of put that representation. But no, Charlie, you take it, but I'm your alternate because I just see that we don't have one there.
Okay, that's a good one.
I'll be your alternate FAB and your alternate on tourism. You'll begin to say, that's my alter ego.
All right. Is there any other comments or desires? Okay. Ryan, I'm not pretending that you got all of that. Let me know if you didn't and you need to watch the tape, or if you need a picture of my notes. Thank you, everybody.
I got every word.
Okay, well, fantastic. Thank you, everybody. You actually made it really, really easy doing this, and so it's stunning to me why I wasn't able to do it before the meeting, and we had to hash it out. But I think it was good. We hashed out a few things. If there's no other, we don't need to open it up for anything. Number 18, bid for council chambers.
I can take that one. We asked for proposals. We put out a request for proposal that closed Friday afternoon. We got 4 proposals from firms that we thought were qualified. 2 of them came in within our budget. And so I think the plan, if it's okay with you guys, is for us to try to work with the low bidder, the lower responder, and see if we can work out a contract that works for us and works for them. And then, we'll put it on the agenda next week to actually get it approved, if you guys are willing to do that. I think the plan is for us to send out our annual supplemental appropriation tomorrow to you guys, so you can have a little bit of time with it. It's going to be a number of pages long, but you can kind of go through it and look things over. Then we'd really like to get together with everybody, just to answer your questions and make sure that everything is clear. And when we do that, we can use that opportunity to also go through the room and make sure that you guys understand what was included in those proposals and what things are going to look like when we're finished. So it's your room. We want you guys to be comfortable with what we're doing there.
I guess I would move that we accept staff's recommendation to empower them to negotiate with a low bidder.
I would second if it includes a hot tub in the chamber.
Of course.
I'm sorry, Charlie, you could say.
I will accept that friendly amendment.
people.
All right. The motion by myself, seconded by Tony. Further conversation? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Any opposed? Looks like motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, guys.
Right. Thank you, Steve. Next item. Help me out, somebody. Shelley, where am I at here? This is Forsac?
19.
Yes.
Thank
Resolution.
you.
This is in support of the Outdoor Restoration Forest Act. This is something I asked we put on the agenda. This is a legislation that Senator Bennett is trying to advance through Congress right now. This is bipartisan. This is supported by Club 20, not exactly the most liberal group in the world. This is for workforce. This is for forest health. This is for work, like providing more funding for forest health and workers and getting those workers into the forest to do projects, trail projects. And, you know, it has Andy Mueller support from Colorado River District, again, Club 20, Northwest Colorado Councils of Governors. Yeah, just a whole wide range of support from factors and people on the Western Slope primarily. So I guess I'm available to answer any questions. It's still being, you know, it's a form of support that I'd like for us to take that, again, is in it's not in its final form yet, but just is something that he's going to run up the table. And I think having a show of support from Western Slope communities would be helpful to him. And it's in your packet too, with staff notes as well.
I'll make a motion that we write a letter of support on resolution number 2021-11 in support of the Outdoor Restoration Forest Act.
I'll second.
Moved by Ingrid, seconded by Paula. Any further conversation or questions? All right. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, the way I read it, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but isn't resolution 2021-11, isn't that our resolution in support of it? Ziegler said to write a letter in support of the resolution.
Jonathan, you asked for a resolution, not a letter.
Oh, but he included a letter. So that's why I was like, oh, I need to include that language of that letter. So I'm gonna amend my motion and just say, I'm gonna make a motion to approve resolution number 2021-11 in support of the Outdoor Restoration Forest Act.
I'll amend mine.
Okay. Let's see, it's just a resolution. We can just do a voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. All right, rocking through it now. Item number 20, citizen survey.
Mr. Mayor, I move to continue citizen survey number 20 to our next meeting.
Is there a second? It's our last agenda item. We really do need some action on this, Tony, so I'll try to keep it brief. I guess I will, I'm not muting you because I need to mute you. I just get some feedback when you're not muted, Tony. So there's two items here really. And one, we heard a meeting ago that we were all really tore up about having to raise water rates 36% and additionally 5% a year thereafter, unless we take affirmative action not to. And there are several comments from council that, you know, maybe this is something we look at in the fall to partially address through looking at a infrastructure sales tax measure or some other way to accomplish something like that. So that's part of what I guess we're looking for is there support to do one, a poll of the citizens to see if there is at all support. This is not I'm not asking for and this is based on council comments that there was some interest in it. There might not be tonight, but all we're looking for is authorization and budget authorization for Deborah, and she will tell us where that would come from to be able to get a poll out there. Because if it is something that the citizens are concerned about and would like to weigh in with, potentially a tax question, we really do need to get a poll out into the community so they can inform us if they agree with us that it's a problem, if they would like to address it, how they would like to address it in other ways other than pothole patching and rate increases. So that's part of it. But then in having further conversations, so that's one part, put a pin in it. The other part is there's a lot of things in our community that, I think we're plugged into everybody. But, when I look around and see that we don't represent, there is a lot of people in our community that we don't represent. And so I think we're going to have a comprehensive plan that we need to do. We should be doing it every 10 years. If we start tomorrow, it will be 11 years before we get it done from the 2011. And a large part of that's got to be, in my opinion, a wide-ranging citizen survey to help inform that plan. So that's a whole nother thing. That's why it's on the agenda as a citizen survey, because I think I would like to have two questions to ask of council. One, if we'd be willing to have staff move forward and authorize staff. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but in a timely manner to be able to gather the information we might need to explore what that might look like for a tax in the fall. Number one. And number two, a conversation about a larger survey, not necessarily a poll question survey, but a larger survey that includes the entire community in the conversation. So I guess that was my presentation of the agenda item. I see a lot of hands up. Steve Davis, Shelley Kopp, and Tony Hershey. Steve Davis.
I was just reflecting back on the last, what I would say was a comprehensive survey of the community. And my mind fails me, at my old age, but I think it was probably 4 years ago. And I think it's probably time about every 4 years where you did survey the public. And I think I was on council at that time, and we really appreciated the feedback that we got from that. So I would support something like that. I wouldn't want to do a survey that was just pointed that, you asked one or two questions. I mean, you can throw in one or two questions if you really want to know those, but it ought to be comprehensive. And I think we ought to go back to that survey that was done, I think 4 years ago, and use that as, you think more than that?
As before Shelley and I were on council.
Yeah, it was before you were on council. Anyway, I'd like to. What?
2016.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that was a good tool. I think we ought to start with that survey as an outline. I'd like to see that survey again, and I have no idea where it is in my archives, but I'm sure staff could pull that up quickly and send that back around, and we could kind of take that same survey. So we are comparing some apples to apples there. And then there may be some questions about the Grand Avenue Bridge you pull out of that, but some other questions about infrastructure tax that you would throw into it.
Well, and Steve, I think with the clarification that I would need is, if we're going to look at this fall for a potential infrastructure tax, a community-wide survey of the like that you're discussing is probably a 4 to 6 month process. And that time does not allow for that. So I think there's the two questions. One would be an actual scientific poll that we would get out with a pollster to judge the community's willingness or, where they feel about that specific issue. But then separate from that is what you're speaking of, is a community-wide survey that is comparable to 2016. But I don't believe we can do a community-wide survey that happens to ask those kind of questions in that manner. They're very different things.
Huh. Seems like to me the survey is, it doesn't take any longer. It's like you ask 2 questions or 20 questions. Why would one take 6 months and one only take 2 months? But, I'm not a pollster. Maybe you are. So
I'm not a pollster. Deborah, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, Steve, I think the survey you're talking about was the one that was done right ahead of the A&I tax question. So it was more of a tax survey. So that is one part that Jonathan is talking about. The other part is a survey we could do more during the comprehensive plan. And that is kind of when you would go through and ask citizens like, are you happy with your parks and rec services? Are you happy with the community center? Do you feel like council listens to you? I've been part of those in other cities, and city council does find them helpful. And I think it's a good base to start the comprehensive plan, potentially.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump back in and just say I would appreciate if you could send me that 216 survey so that I could recall it exactly, but because I thought it had a lot of warm and fuzzy questions on it as well. Do you like who your mayor is? Do you like city council? Do you think the city's going in the right direction? That kind of thing. And there was tax in there, and it was an A&I thing. I understand that too. And now it's not an A&I thing, it's a infrastructure or streets question that we have.
But yes, absolutely, we will find that and send it to all of you.
Go ahead, Tony.
Well, I can answer the question, do you feel that city council listens to you? Because the answer would be no. I could not be more opposed to something like this, some sort of push-pull where this council is attempting to, again, try to shove a sales tax down the people's throats. We have a poll. It's called an election. If you guys want to put it on the ballot, I wouldn't support it, but I'd be outvoted. Go ask them again and see how your tax question. I told Charlie today that I hope you put it on April of 2023, because that would be perfect for me. I don't like these sort of polls where you're going to say, do you hate your streets? Yes. Do you know we need to, and if someone could mute themselves, please. If you could, do you want to fix your streets? Yes, of course I do. Well, how do you want to fix them? The best way is for a tax increase, right? Yes. I mean, if you're going to ask these questions, I was discussing with Charlie today, then ask them other questions too, like, well, what city services are you willing to give up in exchange for infrastructure? What if we had to shut down the rec center? I mean, you have to ask real tough questions, not direct the people into this, let's vote on a sales tax and here it's so great. And it's almost a pre-campaign. And Carl, it sort of strikes me as almost electioneering by council where you're setting up, and I know it doesn't violate the law specifically, but you're almost setting up, oh, here's going to be a vote on the street tax. This is why we should do it. Isn't this great? I mean, if you really want feedback, all you have to do is walk outside and ask people and you'll get the feedback. You got the feedback in 2019 from the people on the street tax. I can't support this poll. I think it's a waste of money. The money that if we're going to put the poll and stick it in some of those potholes that Shelley was mentioning, that would be helpful. But to waste more money on this is just is nonsensical to me. Let's fix the things that we need to fix. You don't have to ask people if they like potholes or not. They don't, trust me. They want their infrastructure. They want this as a priority. I wouldn't be sitting here or sitting on this council if that wasn't the case. Now, if things change, they change. But I just don't know what a poll is going to reveal. And these touchy-feely questions like, are you happy with your council, are silly. It's not productive and I don't support it and I'm not going to vote for it. Thank you.
Jonathan, just real quickly, it is, if structured correctly and surveyor polling data can be extremely helpful. And I think Councilor Hersey raises a great question. You'll be beat up if you say which city services do you want to cut to fund infrastructure, right? But unfortunately, I think that's a question that's been raised in the budget cycle and hasn't been answered. So it probably is a good way to ask that question, and I think it's a fair question to ask. And most of these, if they're done well, they're not push polls. That's the entire point. Because if it's a push poll, you actually, from having been somebody who utilizes that information in an election cycle for a number of these ballot questions over the years, a push poll actually is not helpful because it doesn't gauge actually what's going to happen, right? What Councilor Hirsch is referring to is what you do when you're campaigning at the end as an advocacy group, and you start making those phone calls in the last 30 days before the election. But this kind of polling data is really, if scientifically done, is incredibly valuable to understand where the community's at.
Yeah, and I'm trying hard not to be offended by the allegation that we would use public tax dollars to market a particular political position, Councilor Hershey. No one said a push pull. No one
You
said
can
any.
be offended. I'm not offended.
Okay.
It's exactly what you're doing. You haven't listened
No, it's
to the
not.
voters
No, it's
and
not. I'm asking council if there is a desire to put out a scientific poll from a reputable third-party polling firm to give us the information that would help shape the idea or not. We're only asking the citizens. I don't believe that you know what the citizens feel, Tony, any more than I believe that Charlie does, or Ingrid, or myself. The only way to really gauge the citizenship and what they feel is to do a poll, to ask them directly. And I think that is very democratic. And so I'm advocating that we do a democratic, spend up to $30,000 for a scientific poll from a reputable third-party polling firm to get us information. And if that information comes back, absolutely, that the people don't believe that the streets are a problem, or if they are, that there's zero support or very, very low support to pay for them, then we have our answer. And then we don't have to go through a costly election. We don't have to have citizens tearing each other apart in the paper, in the comments section. That's the whole point of this. Let's nip this in the bud. If you are indeed right, and you very well could be, that there's no support for this and no one wants this, then let's do this and nip it in the bud so that we don't have to spend 9 months talking about this and tearing our hair out. That's what I would advocate. And I think that is a good return on our time, staff's time, and the community's time and collective energy. And I'm not offended, Tony. I got over my.
I'm
Paula,
glad you're not offended.
Go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, I was listening to what Tony said and Jonathan and I'm listening. But I do think that I think we might see some change in public opinion once those water rates hit their mailbox. So offering people an opportunity to answer some questions, I think it'd be a good time to do it rather than spend the expense of doing the voting, in November without asking those questions. I think we need to find out where the public stands on this. I kind of feel like they're going to be a little surprised July 1st or July 15th or whenever they get their water bill and really understanding what it means to pay for infrastructure. So I'm not sure if that's a push pull or what that is, but I would just be curious on where the public stands on this idea of how do you pay for city services, and how would, what their perspective is. I'm interested, like Steve said, in hearing what people think. I think I can make better decisions when I hear those noises.
Thanks, Paula. Ingrid.
So I echo Paula, and that I too believe that some real-time data from our constituents may help us not only in the discussions of a potential tax rate increase in November, but also with other items as well, obviously. So I'd love to see the direction that the 2016 survey gives us. I'm curious, was that a city-funded survey? Or was that a community on the move funded survey?
2016, I believe, was city funded.
City funded? Okay.
But it was pre-me, like just pre-me. So
yeah.
I think it was Community on the Move. I was involved in the Community Move at that time, and I'm pretty sure that they had raised the money and did it. But Ingrid, I could be wrong with that.
Okay.
I concur, Charlie. I think it was Community on the Move that put that together.
Yeah, the only thing I would say though is that it was released publicly, which it would not have had to have been by Community on the Move.
But I think the decision, Carl, was at that point that the council looked at it and said, yeah, we want to release this. I think that's what happened. But I could be wrong. I should remember that because
I just don't.
Quite
To be clear, though, the 2018 fire district tax ballot was paid for by the city and was published as soon as we got the results. So there's that.
Okay, so then
And
my
maybe
next
that's-
question is, if we authorize this 30,000 tonight, whom will be doing the poll? What company? Like, what are the details on that? And you know, do they have a history of success? I mean, and then also, so that's one question. And my second question is, what will be the stages? Like, will we be given a doodle poll on questions that we want to include, or, you know, can we exempt some? Like, how will that play out?
You know, so I would, I guess, leave staff the direction to utilize a polling firm, either one that we have used in the past or their best judgment. I feel that between Carl and Deborah, they can probably pick somebody that has a very strong track record of good polls with good data and good results. So I guess I'd leave that up to them. And I would say, as far as process goes, you're right. The questions are really important. So I think getting a noticed open invitation to all of council to be able to talk with potential pollsters about that, because I want to squash any idea that there would be a push pull. I would love Councilor Hershey to be there to ensure that integrity. And I mean that absolutely sincerely, Tony, that it'd be great to have your voice there. I know you disagree with it. You're going to vote against it, but it's still important to have someone there to ensure the integrity, because I just don't want people that in the future goes, well, of course they're going to ask it this way. They need your voice there. So does that answer your question, Ingrid?
It does. And then I have one last question. And then what is this number, this 30,000? Where are we basing it on? We haven't done a survey since 2016. Are we just, have we already acquired some bids? Kind of where are we at with that?
It was 25, I think it's like 22,000. Help me out here, Steve Boyd. Just recall exactly what we spent 2 years ago. In 2018, when we went for the fire district, it was in the mid to lower 20s. So I'm adding an inflationary factor and giving staff the authorization to go up to, hoping they don't have to. So that was kind of the ballpark of the 30,000 genesis.
Okay, that answers the majority of my questions. But to be honest, there still feels like there's a lot of muddy water as to how this will be executed and the timing. But I trust staff to be able to come back and give us some clarity on those. So thank you.
Thanks. Charlie, then Shelley, then Steve.
I'll be fairly brief. I think Ingrid can answer a lot of the questions. Deborah just set up the poll from 2016. It was done by Frederick Polls, and the other organization that Community on the Move has used consistently is a gentleman by the name of Steve Welcher. I can't remember his group, but it would be certainly my view that we should use those same people. They're very familiar with Glenwood. They've been very good at understanding what we need and how to do it. They're obviously going to get the updated from what things have changed since 2016. But and the only place I'll differ, Jonathan, is my recollection when we did this 16 vote, it was a $30,000 ticket. So I'm a little concerned about the number. So.
And Welcher, he was with Community on the Move. Is that who they also used, or just this is the one from
Steve Welcher he's a consultant out of the Denver area that has worked with Community on the Move since I think 2006, whenever they first started really doing things, and many go further back than that. I know that the Community Move's been doing things since the late 80s. You know, I remember their first one of the first campaigns, but shortly after I was out of the city attorney's office. So.
There's a handful of polling firms out there that do issue questions like this, or do kind of community surveys like this, that are competent at doing them as scientifically valid. I mean, what you don't want is to have somebody who's like, doing anonymous online stuff, right? You need some veracity to the data that you're pulling in. And so Welcher is one of those guys that works with communities on these kinds of questions. There's a handful of other ones out there that do as well.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. That helps quite a bit.
So Charlie, just to that point, would you suggest that we authorize 35 just to cover our basis?
In fact, I'll make a motion that we authorize city staff to begin the process to get the poll and expend up to 35,000. If it turns out to be more, I'll have to come back, but I would be more comfortable with that number.
And I would second that. For the conversation, Shelley, or I'm sorry, yes, Shelley.
So my question on the motion is where does the funding come from?
It's a great question.
Do we have a source?
I'm going to say we should add it if it's not too late to our budget amendment that you guys will be getting tomorrow. So probably the general fund reserve.
It'll come from the general fund in just general government.
Because I'm anticipating though that we might be doing another much broader community survey as part of the comprehensive plan later this year, right? So will that come out of planning or again, general fund?
I think we're going after DOLA funds to help match, but yeah, I mean, that would be solidly a general fund expenditure or comp plan, I would think.
Okay. So I have a little bit of concern about having those two polls in 1 year and whether or not we could consolidate them or not. I understand Jonathan's concerns about getting this one done quicker and that time may be of the essence, but yeah, I have a little bit of concern about that because is it double the cost then?
And I would say they're very different and you wouldn't want to combine them. You know, one is focused on problem issue, tax question, and the other one is just generally speaking, how does the community feel about growth, not growth, parks, city hall, they're just different. And you'd have trouble getting people to respond to something that was long enough to do them both.
Okay. So I do kind of understand and sympathize with Councilor Hershey's comments is that I want to make sure that we're not doing a push-pull, that we're not leading towards a certain preconceived solution to this poll. So I'd like to make sure we're really careful about that. But I do think the timing is important that we start to consider this because the street tax will be coming up for renewal in, is it 5 years? It is coming up. And we do have, a lot of streets that need fixing, which we know we don't have the revenue stream right now to do what we really need to do. So the whole idea of a possible repeal and replace might, take care of that tax that's coming near the end of its life anyway. So I think it's worth looking at. I don't know if we're going to roll in any other issues with this infrastructure tax kind of questions, such as the concepts that have been floated out there about transportation or anything like that, or if we'll just stick to this one topic.
And I'll just speak from my experience with the last time we did this. I think we need to be very careful and very intentional if we do try to tag. We don't want to put too many Christmas ornaments on this tree that's going to topple over, because we put two questions on that 2018 fire district one. One is, do you like your streets? And two is, would you want to pay half cent or 3/4 cent? And all three questions pulled great, but they were added as an afterthought. And part of the veracity of a scientific survey is you don't keep people on the phone for 20 minutes. And if you start to ask about transportation and what people feel about the airport or revisiting the vaping conference, or these very community, large scale conversations, then you start to dilute the response rate that you're going to get for the core issue which you want to address. So I'm not opposed to asking the pollster. But I remember the last time I asked the pollster, he said it wasn't a good idea.
Okay, and I'm okay because we will have that other survey going on where we can put some of those other questions in. But I think focusing this one on infrastructure is okay. See how the public feels about it, how they want to pay for it, and how also I think we should have a little bit of timeline because, that depends on what kind of revenue stream we want. How many years do we need to be able to get our infrastructure up to the level that we'd like to see it be? So Okay.
Thanks, Shelley. Steve Davis.
I think the pollster that we choose will give us a lot of guidance on what questions to ask and how involved to get in that. I do know that we were very happy with the outcome of 216 poll that we took. So, I would really kind of lean back to that same pollster personally, or one of those two. I don't think we ought to reach out and grab somebody we've never had any experience with. I do wish that it was a poll taken kind of at arm's length from the city. I have a lot of concerns about that. Community on the Move is a perfect organization to put out a poll. I think it actually works better than when it comes from the city of Glenwood Springs, but you may not be able to talk them into that. And as I recall, I think we paid $25,000. They paid $25,000 for that poll in 216. So you're 30, and I wouldn't be, by today's numbers, we've had a lot of inflation, haven't we, since 216? So.
And Steve, we've talked to Mike McCallum, or I've talked to Mike McCallum, and I think Community Move is interested in working with us again. So.
So looks like we had a motion. Did we have a motion? Did I second it? I think I seconded it. I can't remember. Did Ingrid make the motion? Charlie did. Charlie made the motion. I seconded it. All right. Further questions, conversation? Staff, do you feel like you have direction with what this is? And then, not part of this motion. Well, let's just take the vote on this motion. Ryan, could you please call the question?
Sure can. Counselor Hershey.
No.
Counselor Davis.
I wanted to go last.
Counselor Russo.
I'll vote. No, I can't do that. I'll vote yes.
You will vote yes.
We get to tell our order now?
Mayor Pro Tem Willman.
Yes.
Counselor Stepp.
Yes.
Counselor Kaut.
Yes.
Mayor Godis.
Yes.
6-1.
And Paul, that's why we're going to get back to pushing buttons.
I always check to see what Steve did when we were pushing buttons.
You know what? That's funny because my first year on council, that's all I did. I sat next to him on the other side, and I kept looking over to see how Steve was going. You have a lot of influence there, Councilor Davis. I think to say also true, thank you. I think also to stay true to the title of the agenda item, does staff need direction? It sounded like you had general consensus that we want to do something more comprehensive as part of the comp plan. Do you need any more guidance on that or direction, or do you at least feel enough warm fuzzies that you feel good about making it a part of the comp plan?
I think I feel good about making it part of the comp plan. It's kind of standard anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Report from city administration.
Okay. Great news. We had our brick lobbying has gotten a lot of steam. We've gotten a lot of great political support from our senators, our representative, I believe CDOT. So we're going to keep pushing and hope for the best. So I just wanted to update you guys on that quickly. And after I spent like an hour explaining to Jonathan that we would take a step back if we got the brick grant, we had a wonderful visit from our CDOT executive director today. And she told us, we'll be a sponsor if you want to do a regional build grant. Build grant is what we got for South Midland. So with your permission, we're going to work with our region and pull together a build grant with the state for 8th Street and 6th Street and see what happens.
I would make that motion.
And I'll second that motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand to pursue these grant opportunities. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?
Oh, God, sorry.
Dang it, Ingrid, that's so loud.
We'll give it a go and keep trying.
Deborah, like seriously, thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. We so appreciate all your efforts.
We love this. This is fun.
Yes, going after money is fun.
I literally told Deborah yesterday that there's no scenario where I would ever contemplate a job like hers. It is the balls that she and Carl have in the air is, you put a fork in me, I'm done. I'm not that level. Thank you, Deborah. Anything else?
I'm passing on to Carl now.
All
I'm
right.
good, thank you.
I don't have a ton to update you on. Depositions in the RMI case got pushed off till later in the summer, which is a good thing. We're still waiting to hear on a couple of summary judgment motions pending in front of the judge that were filed by Garfield County trying to finish the state case. The only other thing I would tell you is that next week on Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm pretty much going to be unavailable during the day. I'm doing some work for our senators. And then on Thursday and Friday, I'm going to be out flying back to Chicago for my daughter's college graduation. So I'm going to try to kind of not be working the end of the week. So yeah, thank you.
That's winning. Nice job, Dad.
Yeah, and that's in 3 years, not 4.
Now you're taking the victory lap.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I just have to acknowledge it that she is not me, clearly. She's like... Anyway, that's all I got.
All right. Thank you.
Mr.
Congratulations.
Mayor, can I make a motion that we get Ingrid some new light bulbs so she's not yellow?
I would second the motion.
I will connect with the IT department. It's city issued and I can't seem to figure it out. So I will figure it out. For acknowledgement. And I feel fine.
I'll withdraw my motion.
My bilirubin levels are totally appropriate. Okay.
All right. I'd just be happy with high-speed internet, but anyway. Anything else for the good of the order? I would entertain a motion to
I
adjourn.
will make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys. Thank you so much.
Good job.